Hey guys, tonight we drift back into ancient China, where the earth itself seems to heave under the weight of stone and dust. Imagine it. The air is dry, the hills roll endlessly, and somewhere ahead, a jagged spine of half-finished wall claws at the horizon. You aren't standing here as a tourist or gazing at glossy drone footage. No, your wrists are bound with rough hemp rope. Your shoulders ache from the shove of soldiers, and your stomach twists with the realization that you've been taken not as a volunteer, but as a slave. It's a harsh thing to say, but you probably won't survive this story. Not because the narration will suddenly veer into horror, this is still bedtime history after all, but because the reality for those drafted to build the Great Wall was brutal beyond measure. Most never returned home. Still, that's why we're here together tonight, to imagine what it would feel like, step by weary step. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, post your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. It's like a sleepy little constellation of listeners dotted across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day you're taken begins like any other. The rooster crows, the millet pot simmers, and you think you'll spend the morning weeding the patch of beans behind your hut. But the sound of horses clattering down the dirt path ruins that illusion quickly. Soldiers arrive with iron helmets and stern faces, barking orders you can't ignore. Their whips snap against the ground like thunderclaps, and suddenly you're dragged from your doorway, your mother crying, your father protesting until a spear butt slams him down. You barely manage a glance back before you're shoved into a line of neighbours, wrists tied, feet stumbling in dust. Your village disappears behind you, swallowed by hills and smoke, and with it goes everything you know. The smell of rice cooking, the murmur of gossip by the well, the soft rattle of your father's pipe after supper. Now there's only shouting, ropes, and the sour stink of fear. The march is relentless. Each day feels longer than the last. You trudge along mountain paths, over rocky ground that cuts your sandals to ribbons. The soldiers allow no stragglers. If you stumble, the man behind you kicks your calves to keep you upright. One guard, scar running from cheek to jaw, spits in the dirt every 100 paces, as if marking his own grim trail. Another twirls his whip in lazy circles, snapping it just close enough to make your ears ring. You start counting the cracks. 10, 20, 30, until numbers blur into exhaustion. The road is filled with mutters. Some conscripts whisper about why you're being dragged north. The wall, of course. The Emperor Qin Shi Huang has demanded it, a barrier against raiders from the steppes. The Xiongnu, tribes famed for riding swift horses and firing arrows before you could blink. You hear one older man grumble that it isn't a wall so much as a graveyard, that each stone block is just another life snuffed out. He laughs bitterly, saying, "We are the wall." The phrase sticks in your mind, heavier than the rope around your wrists. Historical fact. Estimates vary, but historians still argue whether hundreds of thousands or nearly 1 million people were pressed into this labour force. Farmers during off-season, criminals sentenced to hard labour, and unlucky villagers like you, all mixed together in one desperate march. You've also heard the strange gossip that the emperor drinks potions of mercury, convinced they'll make him immortal. It sounds absurd, like something out of a bad joke, and yet the whispers persist. Historians still debate whether Qin truly believed in alchemy, or if the stories grew taller over time. You snort quietly, imagining him sipping shiny poison while you choke on dust. Not the trade deal you would have chosen. The days blur. food is scarce, a handful of millet gruel with more husk than grain. If you're lucky, there's a shriveled vegetable chunk. If you're unlucky, there's a pebble in the bowl that nearly cracks your teeth. Your belly growls constantly, and even rats scurrying across campfires seem to eat better than you. You wonder whether your family back home is managing to stretch the harvest without your help, or whether hunger is knocking at their door too. At night, the guards tie ropes between prisoners and force you to lie flat in rows. One man rolls to his side and earns a boot in the ribs so hard he coughs blood. You stay stiff as a plank, staring up at the night sky. The stars glitter coldly, thousands of distant eyes watching with indifference. You think of your mother pointing out constellations when you were a child, telling you the stories of dragons and rabbits among the stars. Now they feel like cruel reminders of a world that no longer belongs to you. Finally, after days, maybe weeks, you see it. At first, it's just a jagged silhouette on the ridge. Then, as you climb, the structure grows massive. The wall looms ahead, not a polished monument, but a chaotic sprawl of stone and packed earth. Wooden scaffolding creaks against slopes. Piles of rubble litter the ground, and men swarm like ants carrying baskets of rock. Dust rises so thick it stings your eyes. Even unfinished, the wall steals your breath. It doesn't just sit on the land, it dominates it, winding over hills like some giant creature's backbone. You shiver, not from the wind, but from the sense that your life is no longer yours. The overseer shouts orders, and the line breaks apart. Some are shoved toward quarry pits, others to scaffolds. You're handed a wicker basket already fraying at the edges and told to fill it with stones. A guard barks, "Faster, slave," and cracks his whip, the sound sharp enough to slice your nerves. You glance up again at the wall, towering relentless. Somewhere in your chest, the faintest flicker of pride mingles with fear. After all, this is a work so enormous it might outlast your bones. But that thought sours quickly. Pride means nothing if you'll never live to see it finished. For now, all you can do is lift one rock, then another, sweat dripping, shoulders screaming. You've been offered to the wall, and the wall is hungry. The first sight of the wall should inspire awe, but for you, it feels more like a trap snapping shut. You stand at its base, neck craned back until your jaw aches, staring at stones stacked so high they seem to lean on the clouds. The air tastes like dust, gritty, choking, the sort of dryness that cracks your lips until they bleed without you noticing. Around you, the noise never stops. Hammers clanging against stone, wood scaffolding groaning, overseers shouting until their voices rasp. If home was quiet mornings with chickens scratching in the yard, this place is the exact opposite. An orchestra of misery tuned permanently to loud. You shuffle forward with the rest of the conscripts, eyes darting from the wall to the men already working. Some climb ladders with baskets of rubble strapped to their backs, each step trembling under the load. Others swing mallets to crush stone into chunks small enough for mortar. Everyone looks gaunt, shoulders bent as if they've been permanently pressed by invisible hands. You realise, with a sick twist in your gut, that soon you'll look just like them. The overseers make sure of that. The first one you notice has a whistle carved from bone hanging around his neck, which he blows whenever a worker slows. Each shrill note cuts through the dust like a blade. Another carries a rod of polished bamboo, deceptively light-looking until he cracks it across someone's spine. Then there's the commander, the one with armour gleaming slightly in the sun. He doesn't bother to shout. He just stares with eyes so cold they feel like knives. You don't even need to hear words to know what he's saying. You are expendable. Historical fact here. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, didn't just use criminals and prisoners for the wall. He also conscripted farmers during planting or harvest seasons, leaving fields unattended. Entire villages starved because their able-bodied workers had been taken. Historians still argue whether the massive draft was truly about defense against the Xiongnu, or whether it was just as much about controlling and punishing his own people. You try to make yourself small, invisible in the crowd. Maybe if you move quickly enough, keep your head down, you'll avoid the worst attention. That's the theory anyway. In practice, the guards notice everyone eventually. A young man ahead of you, barely more than a boy, his cheeks still round with youth, slips while climbing a slope with a stone basket. The rocks tumble down, clattering against other workers. The boy drops to his knees, scrambling to pick them up, but the overseer is already there. One sharp crack of the bamboo rod and the boy yelps in pain. He's forced to his feet and shoved harder toward the work site. The message is clear. Stumble once and you pay. Stumble twice and you might not get up again. There's a dark joke muttered among the workers that the overseers measure time not in hours but in broken backs. You smirk at the absurdity, though the smile feels brittle on your lips. It's gallows humour, the kind that makes you laugh just to keep from screaming. As you're shoved forward, you can't help but notice the strange rituals the guards perform. One spits 3 times before climbing scaffolding, muttering something about warding off mountain demons. Another ties a small pouch of herbs to his belt, claiming it will keep spirits from latching onto him. A fellow prisoner leans toward you, whispering, "They think the wall is haunted. Every stone's got a ghost inside." He grins with missing teeth, but his eyes dart nervously toward the towering structure. Quirky detail or not, it unsettles you. Maybe it's superstition, maybe not. But when the wind whistles through the gaps in the stones, it does sound uncannily like voices. You're handed your first task almost immediately. A basket is thrust into your arms, rough wicker scraping your forearms raw. "Fill!" the overseer barks, and points toward a pile of stones. The rocks are heavier than you expect, jagged edges biting into your palms as you load them. The basket digs into your shoulders as soon as you lift it, sending pain shooting down your spine. You stagger a few steps, knees wobbling, but you keep moving. Falling here would mean the whip. By the time you reach the base of the scaffolding and dump the stones, sweat is pouring down your face. Your shirt clings to your back, soaked, and every muscle in your arms screams in protest. And yet, no one gives you a moment to breathe. The overseer's whistle shrieks again, and you're pushed back toward the pile for another load. The hours blur into one another, carry, dump, return, repeat. The sun arcs across the sky like a cruel overseer of its own, beating down with no mercy. You stop thinking about time in terms of minutes or hours and start measuring it in baskets. 5 baskets, 10 baskets, 20. Somewhere after 30, your body begins to feel like it isn't yours anymore. Just a creaking machine operated by pain. Still, scraps of conversation drift around you. A man nearby mutters that the Emperor is obsessed with leaving a legacy. "He wants this wall to last forever," the man says, shifting under his own basket, "so his name outlives him." Another adds bitterly, "We'll outlive nothing, not even today." They both chuckle darkly, though their laughter sounds more like coughing. Historians still argue whether Qin Shi Huang ever saw the wall as it's remembered today, grand, unbroken, iconic, or whether he only saw fragments, rough and temporary. For you, standing here with a basket carving into your shoulders, the debate doesn't matter. What matters is that the stones are real, the whip is real, and your exhaustion is very, very real. When the whistle finally signals a pause, you sink to the ground, chest heaving. The dirt clings to your sweaty skin until you feel like you've been rolled in ashes. You close your eyes for a second, just 1 second, and in that blink you imagine home. The warm smell of rice, your father's steady voice, your mother's hands braiding rope. The vision is so vivid you almost forget where you are. Then a whip cracks too close, and the illusion shatters. You open your eyes again, gaze dragging upward to the endless stones. It hits you with the weight of truth. You're not here to build something. You're here to be consumed by it. The overseers never let you forget who's in charge. The morning after your first day, you wake stiff as a board, your muscles knotted so tight you wonder if you'll ever stand up straight again. But before dawn even blushes across the horizon, the whistles shriek, the bamboo rods slap the ground, and guards storm through the camp kicking sleepers awake. You try to blink the dust from your eyes, but it's useless. It coats everything. Your skin, your clothes, even the inside of your nose. You wonder if your lungs are slowly turning to sand. You rise slowly, but not slowly enough. A whip lashes the dirt near your feet, close enough that you feel the sting of sand against your ankle. The guard sneers, jerking his head toward the stone pile. It's a daily ritual. Start with intimidation, then escalate as the hours stretch. By the time the sun is properly up, the overseers have already drawn blood. They are cruel in different flavours. One favours shouting until his voice cracks, calling you dogs, worms, even walking stones. Another prefers silence. His whip speaks for him. You never hear him yell, but when you see him approaching, you move faster because his punishments come without warning. The most feared is the commander whose armour catches the light like fire. He doesn't bother raising his voice or his weapon often. When he does, people disappear, dragged away to ditches you never see again. There's a twisted kind of strategy here. The guards rotate their cruelty, making sure no one grows used to one kind of torment. It keeps you off balance, like living in a game where the rules change every hour. Quirky detail. Some prisoners swear the commander keeps a tally scratched into the inside of his armour. 1 mark for every man who dies under his watch. Others argue that's ridiculous, but you can't help imagining him scratching the inside of his breastplate with a knife after each death, smiling as though he's keeping score. You shoulder another basket of stones. Your arms ache like fire. Your back knots with every step, but stopping isn't an option. The overseer with the bone whistle blows it once sharp, and you nearly drop your load in fright. You stagger, knees buckling but push forward. The man beside you isn't so lucky. His legs give out, and the basket crashes to the ground with a spray of rocks. Before he can crawl away, the bamboo rod snaps across his shoulders, leaving a welt so angry red it almost looks like flame. He groans, but the guard doesn't stop. Only when 2 other prisoners drag the man back to his feet does the punishment end. You force yourself to keep walking, heart hammering. Historical fact. Records describe that the Great Wall was built under legalist principles. Laws so strict that even small mistakes were punished harshly. Under the Qin dynasty, punishment wasn't about justice, it was about fear. And fear, as you feel every hour, is a powerful motivator. You learn quickly to anticipate cruelty. The guard who favours shouting always starts with insults before reaching for his whip. The silent one tilts his head slightly before striking, as if listening for your bones to creak. The commander, well, he doesn't telegraph anything. When he approaches, you work as if the gods themselves are watching. The worksite is its own kind of hell. Scaffolds sway dangerously under too much weight. Stones crumble if you set them wrong. And when you misstep, the overseers aren't the only threat. The wall itself seems eager to punish you. You've seen men sliced open by jagged stone, others crushed when baskets topple from above. The overseers don't pause for accidents. If you fall, you're just another wasted tool. During a rare pause for water, you crouch in the dust, gulping down liquid from a cracked clay ladle. The water is warm, gritty with sand, but it's life. Beside you, two men whisper about the Xiongnu, the supposed enemy this wall is meant to stop. Why should we suffer for them, one mutters. The other shrugs, his lips white with thirst. The Emperor says it's for protection. But who protects us? They both chuckle grimly, though it sounds more like coughing than laughter. Historians still argue whether the wall was ever effective against nomadic raids. Some believe it was more of a psychological barrier, a symbol of imperial power, than a true military defence. For you, standing here with dust caked in your hair and lashes at your back, the scholarly debate doesn't matter. What matters is that you're breaking your body for stones that may not even serve their intended purpose. As the day wears on, your body begins to betray you. Your shoulders slump, your steps falter, and even lifting a half-filled basket feels impossible. That's when the guards descend hardest. One jabs the butt of his spear into your ribs, leaving you gasping. Another yanks your hair to force your head upright. "Eyes forward, slave," he snarls, and the laughter from other guards echoes like a cruel chorus. You grit your teeth, swallow your anger, and keep walking. And yet, somewhere inside, a flicker of defiance remains. When the commander passes by, his armour glinting, you imagine, just for a second, what it would be like if the conscripts turned on him. Thousands of weary workers against a handful of guards. The thought sparks and dies almost instantly. You know the overseers have weapons, training, and no hesitation to kill. Still, you hold on to that tiny ember, because without it, you'd have nothing but despair. By the time the whistle shrieks to signal evening, you're trembling so hard your teeth chatter. Dust clings to your skin until you look more like a statue than a person. You collapse onto the ground, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the towering wall above. It casts a shadow so long it seems to reach across the land, swallowing everything in its path. And in that shadow, you realise something chilling. This isn't just a wall of stone. It's a wall of fear, built as much from suffering as from mortar. Your hands no longer feel like hands. They're claws, split, swollen and caked with grime that never truly washes off. The wicker baskets bite into your palms, and the stones grind deep enough to open wounds that scab over by morning, only to tear open again by noon. You don't even bother counting the blisters anymore. They've merged into one long ribbon of pain stretching across your skin. Sometimes you imagine that when you finally die, the wall won't need mortar. It will have your blood already mixed in. The overseers call it labour. To you, it's ritualised torture disguised as construction. The rhythm is unbroken. Haul from the quarry, climb the dirt ramp, dump, descend, repeat. Each basket weighs as much as a small child, but unlike a child, the rocks don't cling to you warmly. They scrape, bruise and punish. The slope is steep, slick with sweat, dust and mud from spilled water. Your legs tremble with every climb, your shoulders knot, your breath rasps like a bellows that's almost out of air. Yet the moment you pause to suck in a lungful of dust-filled wind, the whistle shrieks, and a bamboo rod snaps too close to your back. One of the older men, his beard flecked with white, mutters through broken teeth, "The wall is alive. It eats us. Hands, backs, blood. It swallows everything." You almost laugh at the absurdity, but when you look down and see your own palms stained red, you don't find it funny anymore. Quirky tidbit. Even centuries later, Folktales claim human bones were ground into the foundations. Scholars insist that's mostly legend, but here, every time a man collapses and is dragged away, you can see exactly how that myth was born. The overseers don't care about myth, they care about speed. Their whistles carve the air like knives, their rods sting across shoulders, their boots slam against dirt in rhythms almost musical. You swear you can still hear those sounds even when you close your eyes, like phantom echoes stitched into your skull. There are different kinds of cruelty among them. One favours insults, calling you worms, pigs, even walking stones. Another prefers silence, punishing with sudden lashes when you least expect it. The commander, with armour that gleams whenever sunlight catches it, rarely speaks at all. He doesn't need to. His stare is enough to freeze you mid-step, and when he finally does gesture, men vanish. You never see where they go. A ditch, perhaps, or maybe directly into the wall. Historical fact. Qin Shi Huang's empire was ruled under legalist principles. That meant absolute obedience, with punishment applied quickly and without pity. Entire families could be punished for one person's failure. Scholars who criticised imperial policies were buried alive, at least according to some accounts. Historians still argue whether that story is exaggerated propaganda, but standing here, feeling the lash sting across your back, it seems completely believable. Your own rhythm of suffering grows automatic. You stop thinking about time in hours or days and begin measuring existence in baskets. 1 basket, 5, 10, 20. Your body becomes a machine that creaks and groans but never stops moving. You no longer feel hunger as a sharp pang, but as a dull, constant emptiness. The millet gruel given twice a day is more husk than grain. Sometimes a dried vegetable chunk floats on the surface, and the men cheer as if they've been given roasted duck. It's not just hunger, it's thirst, too. The water is warm and gritty, drawn from shallow pits. When you gulp it, grains of sand grind against your teeth. Still, you savour every mouthful, because the work turns your throat into leather. One evening, you even catch yourself staring at a guard's wineskin with a kind of envy that borders on madness. You would trade days of life for 1 sip of cool water. Accidents are constant. You've seen men tumble from scaffolds, their screams cut short by the crack of bone on stone. You've watched baskets slip, crushing feet until the victim howls, and yet no work stops for them. The overseers bark at the living to keep climbing, keep hauling. The dead are just delays, and delays are unacceptable. The wall itself feels cursed. Stones crack unexpectedly, ropes fray, scaffolds sag under too much weight. The mountains groan as if resenting the scars carved into their sides. Some workers whisper that the spirits of the land are furious, and the night winds seem to prove them right. When gusts whistle through unfinished gaps, they sound like voices, mournful, keening. You shiver under your thin blanket, wishing it were just superstition, but knowing deep down that the sound is too human to ignore. Yet still you push forward. Because stopping means punishment, and punishment here is worse than the labour itself. One guard has already singled you out, calling you crooked shoulders. Every time your knees buckle, his rod finds your back. You tell yourself you'll outlast him, even though your body trembles like a fraying rope. You overhear the guards sometimes. They think you're too broken to listen, but your ears catch their words. One complains, gnawing on dried meat. The emperor wants this finished faster, as if time bends for him. Another laughs, uneasy. Why not? He thinks he's a god, doesn't he? Drinks mercury like wine. You tuck that away. both horrified and weirdly amused. Imagine the most powerful man in the world sipping poison, chasing immortality, while you bleed into stones. That's irony sharp enough to slice. Historians still argue whether the emperor truly believed he could cheat death, or whether it was just his alchemists feeding him lies. Either way, it's grim comfort to know that even the man who enslaved you has his own foolishness. When night falls, you collapse onto dirt beside the other conscripts. The firelight flickers over gaunt faces, men too tired even to curse. Voices murmur faintly, prayers to ancestors, half-hearted jokes that no one laughs at. You try to picture your village, your father's voice, your mother's hands, the warmth of the cooking fire. But the memory slips away each night a little more. The wall presses in on your mind until there's nothing left but stone. Lying there, hands throbbing, muscles spasming, you realize something chilling. You're not building the wall. The wall is building itself brick by brick, feeding on your labour, your blood, your very life. And when it's finished, it will stand tall and silent, while you and all the others who gave their bodies to it will be long forgotten. You wake before dawn, though it's not so much waking as it is being dragged from a shallow pit of half-sleep. The whistle blasts, thin and shrill, cutting through the mist that clings to the mountain slope. Your body protests instantly. Every joint feels rusted shut, every tendon frayed like rope left too long in the rain. But you push yourself up because lying still means a boot in the ribs, or worse, being left behind, which is just another kind of death. The day's burden is simple: carry, climb, repeat. The stones are larger this morning, as if the overseers combed the quarry specifically to find the heaviest, most unwieldy pieces. You kneel beside the pile, brace your legs and heave a block into your arms. It presses into your chest like an unfeeling giant, corners digging deep enough to bruise bone. The basket straps cut across your shoulders, biting in the same old grooves that never get a chance to heal. You begin the march upward. The slope rises steeply, like the back of some colossal beast. Dust slides under your sandals, threatening to spill you backward with each step. Men groan all around you, their breaths wheezing in a sad chorus. You stare at the dirt in front of your feet, because looking up at the towering wall makes your spirit sag worse than the weight on your back. Every few steps someone stumbles. A man in front drops his load, stone rolling and thudding back down the slope. The whistle shrieks and 2 guards pounce. They beat him until he curls like a child, then force the stone back into his arms. You keep climbing, pretending not to notice. You tell yourself it could just as easily be you. Historical fact. Labourers really did drag stones up steep ramps built beside the wall's skeleton. The process was brutal, requiring endless repetition. Horses and oxen were used in some places, but much of the hauling was human. Archaeologists have found the remains of these ramps still carved into the earth, evidence of thousands of steps like yours etched into the landscape. Halfway up, your thighs are burning. Sweat pours into your eyes, stinging with grit, and your arms feel as if they're unravelling. You imagine you'll collapse any second, but somehow your body keeps moving, pulled forward by fear more than strength. A younger boy beside you slips, his load toppling. He scrambles to catch it, but succeeds only in smashing his hand between stone and dirt. His scream rips through the line. You wince, but you can't stop. The guards drag him away, his fingers bent at wrong angles. Another man quickly hoists the abandoned stone. The line doesn't falter. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind, whispered around the campfires. Some villagers believed the Great Wall was so massive that when a person died hauling stones, their spirit was trapped inside the block they carried. That's why the stones are so heavy, one worker joked bitterly one night. "You're not just hauling rock, you're hauling ghosts." You think of that now, feeling the stone pulse like a beating heart against your chest. At the crest of the slope, you dump your burden with a grunt that sounds more like a sob. The block lands with a dull thud among hundreds of others, forming the bones of the wall. Then you turn back down, legs shaking, only to start again. No rest, just an endless loop. The sun climbs, and with it, the heat. Sweat soaks your ragged tunic, and the stone seems to grow heavier with every trip. You learn small tricks, shifting the basket straps, resting the load briefly on your thigh, focusing only on the next step instead of the mountain above. But no trick eases the ache in your spine or the raw bite of the straps digging deeper into your skin. Historians still argue whether the sheer number of workers, sometimes said to be hundreds of thousands, was inflated in later stories to emphasize Qin Shi Huang's cruelty. Maybe it was exaggerated, maybe not. But when you're one broken body among a sea of broken bodies, numbers hardly matter. The suffering feels infinite. At midday, the overseers grant a pause. You collapse onto the ground, chest heaving. The ration today is the same thin millet gruel, but it feels like a feast after hours of hauling. You drink greedily, ignoring the grains of dirt floating in the bowl. The boy with the broken hand is nowhere to be seen. No one asks. Questions are dangerous. One man murmurs a curse under his breath, blaming the emperor for every ache in his body. Another quickly hushes him, eyes darting to the guards. Words travel faster than stones, and punishment for disloyalty is severe. Still, whispers linger. A few wonder if the emperor will ever see this section of the wall, or if he only cares about hearing it's done. "He'll never step on these stones," someone spits, "but he'll step on our backs until we vanish." Afternoon brings no mercy. The line forms again, and you shoulder another stone. The rhythm resumes. Up, down, up, down. Sometimes you lose track of where you are, trapped in a haze of dust and exhaustion. The world narrows to your next step and the ache in your arms. The sun dips lower, but the labour never ends until the sky turns red and the guards finally call halt. By the time night falls, your body is trembling uncontrollably. You drop onto the dirt, too tired to eat, too tired even to think. Your arms feel as though they've been replaced by dead weights. Yet somewhere in the back of your mind you laugh, soft, bitter. You laugh because the wall keeps rising, stone by stone, and you realize you're not building a monument. You're feeding a monster. The sun doesn't just shine here. It rains like a tyrant. By mid-morning, the sky has burned itself into a hard, cloudless blue, and the heat pours down with the weight of a hammer. You shuffle forward in the work line, every inch of your body already slick with sweat, your tunic plastered to your back like a second, suffocating skin. The stones you haul radiate warmth too, so that carrying one feels like holding the sun's offspring against your chest. You quickly realize that the wall itself becomes a furnace. The pale stone catches the light, bouncing it straight back into your face until you squint and blink against a glare that never lets up. Dust lifts in shimmering curtains, filling your throat until each breath scalds. You cough, but coughing costs you air you can't spare. The guards don't care if you choke. They care only that the baskets keep moving up and down the slope, step after punishing step. By late morning, dizziness sets in. It sneaks up like a thief. First a faint blur at the edges of your vision, then a pulsing behind the eyes, and finally a sensation that the ground is tilting, even though you know it's steady. You stagger, catch yourself, and keep going. Everyone around you is weaving the same way, like a line of drunkards at some cruel tavern. where the ale is made of fire. Historical fact. Records describe workers collapsing under extreme heat and exposure. There was no concern for their survival. If one dropped, another was pushed forward to replace him. Unlike soldiers or artisans, labourers were seen as expendable. Their lives weighed against the progress of stone. Scholars still argue whether mortality reached the legendary 1 life for every yard ratio told in folk songs. But in this sun, that figure doesn't sound exaggerated at all. Your lips crack until they bleed. Your tongue feels like leather rubbed raw, swollen so badly it rubs the roof of your mouth with every breath. The water ration comes only once, tepid and gritty, handed out in a chipped clay cup. You drink it in a single swallow, though your body screams for more. The guards watch with smirks, skins of their own sloshing lazily at their belts. One tips his water over the dirt on purpose, laughing when the mud drinks it down. Quirky tidbit. Some workers mutter about a folk remedy, placing a smooth stone on the tongue to fool the body into thinking it's moist. You try it, slipping a pebble between cracked lips. For a moment it helps. Then the heat bakes the stone, and it becomes just another furnace in your mouth. You spit it out, tasting copper. The hours stretch. Shadows shorten until they nearly vanish, leaving you exposed in the full glare of the sun. The air is so hot it shimmers, the mountains themselves bending in your vision. A boy beside you collapses mid-step. His stone tumbles down the slope, thudding into another man's leg. The guards swoop, beating them both, one for falling, the other for being struck. The boy doesn't rise. They drag him to the side and leave him under the sun, unmoving. You don't look back. Looking back is too dangerous. The sweat dries into salt that stings every raw patch of skin. Your eyes burn until tears force their way out, sliding down dust-caked cheeks like thin rivers through a desert. The ground beneath your feet radiates warmth through your sandals, cooking your soles with every step. You wonder if your bones are warming too, slowly roasting from the inside out. At midday, the whistle shrills and the line halts. You slump into the dirt, chest heaving, every breath scraping like sandpaper. A meagre ration is passed around. Thin millet gruel, more water boiled off than left behind. You force it down, though the heat makes you want to retch. Some men dip strips of rag into their bowls and tie them around their foreheads, a flimsy attempt to keep cool. Others simply lie back, eyes closed, mouths open, as if begging the air for mercy. The guards, meanwhile, lounge in the shade of a hastily built awning. They gnaw dried meat, drink from wineskins, and laugh about trivial things. One brags about a woman he plans to buy in the next town. Another boasts of his brother's farm where the river runs cool and clear. You listen, not because you want to, but because the sound cuts into you like a blade. They live in a different world, even though their boots stand only a few paces from your bare, cracked feet. Historians still debate how much of this labour was forced conscription of peasants versus punishment for criminals. Some records suggest hardened convicts worked alongside ordinary farmers seized from their villages, but when the sun scorches everyone the same way, those distinctions blur. Whether you were a thief, a farmer, or simply unlucky, the heat doesn't care. It levels all men into husks. The work resumes. Afternoon is worse than morning. Your muscles feel hollowed out as if the sun has drained the marrow itself. Every step requires willpower you didn't know you had. The stone on your back presses so deeply, you imagine it fusing with your ribs, becoming part of you. The ground swims before your eyes, and more than once you nearly pitch forward, saved only by instinct clawing at your balance. One man whispers a prayer as he walks, muttering to the ancestors to cool the air. Another sings a snatch of a lullaby, perhaps trying to trick himself into believing he's somewhere else. You catch fragments of their words, threads of humanity trying desperately not to unravel in the furnace. Then comes the cruelest joke of all, a breeze. For one glorious moment wind stirs across the slope. You raise your head, expecting relief, but it's hot, a blast straight from a kiln. The dust it kicks up blinds you, forcing you to stumble blindly forward, tears streaming down already salt-burned cheeks. You curse under your breath, quietly, always quietly. By late afternoon, men are dropping more frequently. The line lurches as gaps form, and the guards scramble to fill them with curses and blows. You hear the sickening thump of a body hitting stone, then silence. The wall grows taller, but the men grow fewer. At last, when the sun dips toward the horizon, the whistle shrieks again. You collapse to your knees, trembling too badly to stand. The air cools slightly, though the stones still radiate heat like a fire pit. The guards bark orders, driving you toward the camp. You stumble, half-conscious through the twilight haze. That night, lying on the hard earth, you find yourself laughing bitterly at a thought. The Emperor dreams of immortality, yet here you are, already turning into dust long before your time. The wall will stand for centuries, perhaps even millennia, but your body is being burned away in real time, grain by grain, like incense before a god who never cared to listen. Dawn comes slower than you remember, or perhaps it never truly left. You awaken in the shallow trench you've claimed for sleep, muscles stiff as if they've been moulded in stone overnight. The wind carries dust up from the slope, and every inhalation scratches the inside of your throat. It's a dry, coarse air that tastes like burnt clay and iron, and you gag slightly before forcing yourself upright. Around you, the camp stirs in quiet murmurs. Men clutch their arms, roll their shoulders, whisper prayers they've likely forgotten by the next shout of the whistle. The overseers don't pause for recovery. Their whistles scream across the slope, slicing through the morning like knives. Bamboo rods snap at dirt and stone with almost musical precision, each crack a punctuation mark in the endless sentence of labour. You raise your basket and feel it weigh more than yesterday, heavier than anything you've ever carried. The sweat that drips down your neck stings your eyes, carrying fine dust that tastes bitter on your tongue. You climb again. Every step is a negotiation between pain and necessity. The dirt ramps are slick from previous sweat and mud. Your sandals slip, forcing you to press harder against the slope with raw, aching feet. Men stagger around you, some collapsing mid-step, stones clattering to the earth like rain. The overseers descend immediately, rods swinging. Groans ripple through the line, as predictable as the sunrise, but no one stops. Historical fact. Some estimates suggest that over 300,000 workers, including criminals, conscripted peasants and soldiers, were involved in constructing the first sections of the wall. Death was not rare. Scholars still argue about the exact mortality rate. Some accounts suggest tens of thousands per year, though others claim this number was exaggerated to dramatize the emperor's cruelty. Looking at the line of exhausted men, you realize that even without numbers, the threat of death is palpable, lurking behind every step, every slip. The wall itself seems alive. Each stone laid is a small mountain, and each mountain is alive with echoes of suffering. You've heard whispers, sometimes at night, sometimes while climbing, that spirits of the fallen inhabit the wall. Some say it's just superstition, others that it's an observation. Every stone carries the weight of blood and bone. The thought lingers as you heft another block, imagining it absorbing your effort, your sweat, your pain. You glance at the men around you. One older worker mutters about how he once tried to protest, only to be dragged away and beaten until he could barely stand. Another whispers about seeing the emperor from a distance once, standing on a terrace, gazing over the vast stretch of unfinished wall. He watches us like ants, he says, voice bitter, and when we die, he just steps over our bodies and doesn't care. You nod silently, swallowing hard, your jaw aching from clenching it so tightly. Quirky detail. Some prisoners swore that the emperor's alchemists would give him mercury pills, claiming they were the secret to immortality. The irony is unmistakable. Men die under the sun, while the emperor drinks poison to prolong life. You imagine him sipping, smiling, perhaps unaware that your cracked hands and blistered feet are constructing his eternal monument. By mid-morning the sun hangs heavy, burning everything it touches. Your sweat-soaked tunic clings to your chest and back, almost as if fused to your skin. The stones radiate heat, making each lift a kind of torture. Your arms feel hollow, muscles quivering under the unending strain. The boy beside you trips, his basket tipping stones down the ramp. The overseers descend like predators, whistling, screaming, cracking rods against backs. The boy rises, face pale, and continues, driven by fear more than strength. You keep your gaze fixed forward, though your vision swims with heat and exhaustion. Midday rations are a thin gruel, barely enough to dampen the constant gnaw of hunger. You drink the warm, gritty water and dip your rag into it, pressing it to your forehead to stave off sunstroke. Some of the men chant short prayers, mumbling to ancestors or gods that they've likely forgotten. You mutter nothing, but the words hang in your throat, a mix of fear and stubborn survival. Historians still debate whether the wall was primarily defensive or more of a labour control project. Scholars note that the emperor's obsession with both security and power created a dual purpose: to repel nomadic invaders and to manage a vast, potentially rebellious population. For you, standing here, these debates feel academic, abstract theories meant for people far from the slope. The only reality is the sweat, the dust, the unbearable weight of stone. The afternoon drags on, every step an endurance test. Dust fills your lungs, sweat scalds your eyes, and the constant strain makes your muscles feel like brittle wood. Occasionally you glimpse distant mountains, their edges shimmering in heat, unreal and untouchable. You remember the village you came from, the warm smell of cooked rice, the simple rhythm of life that now feels like a memory from another person. A pang of grief hits, but there is no time for it. A stumble here costs too much. By evening your body is trembling uncontrollably. You slump into the dirt, unable to rise. Around you the survivors sit silently, faces drawn, eyes hollow, listening to the far-off echoes of stone and whip. The wall continues to rise, indifferent to life or death. You realize in a bitter whisper that you're not building the wall. The wall is building itself, fed on the lives and labour of those beneath it, and when night falls the air cools only slightly. The stones still radiate heat, pressing against your memory like a warning. The morning arrives with a slow, reluctant light, the kind that feels more like a warning than a gift. You open your eyes to the faint orange glow of dawn, but it offers no comfort, only the stark reminder that the day will be another trial, and your body has yet to fully recover from yesterday's strain. Every muscle is rigid, knotted as if you slept inside stone itself, and dust from yesterday's climb still coats your hair, your shoulders, and even the inside of your eyelids. Each blink scrapes the grit deeper, and you wince as you force yourself upright. The first whistle pierces the air, thin and shrill, cutting through the haze like a sword. Your stomach lurches. Your arms ache so profoundly you can feel each tendon stretching against the bone, and your shoulders feel as though they've been pressed into the shape of your wicker basket. Still, you shoulder the stone without hesitation. Hesitation here is punished far more severely than failure. The basket is heavy, heavier than yesterday, as if the stones themselves are aware of your weakness and have conspired to crush you. The slope looms ahead, a relentless beast that demands everything from you. Dust rises in clouds with every step, stinging your eyes and scraping your lungs. Your sandals slip in the soft dirt, forcing you to dig toes and fingers into the slope for balance. You stagger, heaving the basket higher, feeling the pressure drive the air from your lungs. Behind you, men grunt and curse, some collapsing mid-step, only to be dragged upright by overseers who are as unforgiving as the stones themselves. Historical fact. Large sections of the Great Wall were built under conditions so severe that mortality rates were extraordinarily high. Estimates vary, but some suggest tens of thousands of labourers died annually due to exhaustion, accidents, or exposure. Scholars still argue over exact numbers, with some claiming these figures were exaggerated in later chronicles to highlight imperial cruelty. Standing here, you realise the truth doesn't require numbers. The suffering is evident in every strained movement, every collapse, every silent groan along the slope. The wall seems alive, its jagged edges and towering presence both daunting and oppressive. Some whisper among the workers that spirits of the fallen reside in the stones themselves. You're unsure if it's superstition or desperation, but you imagine each block absorbing the sweat, the blood, and the despair of the labourers who have gone before. You carry your stone as though it contains a piece of all those souls, feeling the weight deepen, not just on your shoulders, but on your heart. A boy no older than 14 struggles beside you, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. He lifts a stone that nearly dwarfs his small frame. It slips, crashes to the slope, and the overseers strike him repeatedly. He groans, barely able to stand, and yet he continues, pushed by terror and the unbearable necessity to survive. You force yourself to swallow the impulse to intervene, knowing that stepping out of line invites punishment. Survival demands silence, endurance, and a careful calculation of your limits. Quirky detail. Some prisoners claim that whispering a spirit's name into the stone before placing it will make the wall treat them more kindly. You mutter a name under your breath, half in jest, half in hope, unsure if it will help at all. The thought is a fragile talisman against the oppressive reality around you. By mid-morning the sun hangs overhead, relentless and scorching. Sweat soaks your tunic, sticking to your skin like a second layer, and the stone you carry radiates the heat back into your body. Each step feels like walking inside a furnace, every breath a mixture of dust, grit, and exhaustion. The slope stretches infinitely, and the labour seems unending. You glance at the mountains in the distance, their peaks shimmering in heat waves, unreachable and serene compared to your suffering. Historical fact. The Xin dynasty employed a mix of peasants, convicts and prisoners of war for wall construction. Some were conscripted as punishment, others as a civic duty forcibly imposed. Scholars still debate how voluntary these labour forces truly were. but the conditions themselves made compliance less a choice and more a requirement for survival. Midday brings only a brief pause. Water is doled out in small clay cups, tepid and gritty. You drink, desperate, yet the thirst remains, gnawing at your throat like an unrelenting predator. Millet gruel is offered, barely nourishing, often mixed with sand from the slopes. Men dip strips of rag into their bowls, pressing the wet fabric to their foreheads to stave off sunstroke, while others simply collapse beside the wall, eyes closed, waiting for the heat to pass. The wall itself stretches endlessly, a pale, towering scar on the mountainside. You begin to see it less as a construction project and more as a living organism, feeding on the bodies of men, sustaining itself with pain and toil. Each stone placed is a heartbeat in its monstrous rhythm. You imagine the emperor gazing from his distant terraces, unconcerned with the suffering, obsessed only with the completion of his eternal monument. Evening approaches, but it brings little relief. The shadows lengthen, and the slope cools slightly, though the stones retain the sun's memory, radiating heat that penetrates through your soaked tunic. Your limbs tremble uncontrollably, muscles scream in protest. Yet the wall continues to grow, each layer a testament to endurance forced under cruelty, each stone placed an echo of human suffering. Historians still argue whether the psychological terror induced by such labour was intentional, a method to control the workers, or merely an inevitable consequence of scale and harsh environmental conditions. Standing here, pressed into the slope, sweating, trembling, you feel the answer in every fibre of your being. Survival depends on fear, obedience, and the tiny flickering embers of hope that might sustain you through another day. Night arrives, and you collapse on the dirt, trembling. The wall towers above, indifferent, and the distant echoes of stone and rod follow you into sleep. You close your eyes, imagining the rhythm: stone, slope, rod, breath. The wall moves forward, unfeeling and eternal, and you lie beneath it, part of its lifeblood, its history, its endless story. The sun rises again, almost lazily, as if mocking the exhaustion of the bodies it illuminates. You wake to the familiar grind of aching muscles and the harsh screech of the overseer's whistle. Your arms feel like they're made of lead, yet you lift the basket, shifting the stone into position, as if your body has learned to obey without thought. The slope awaits, unrelenting, and any pause is punished immediately. The climb is worse today than yesterday. Dust swirls around your head, fine particles scraping the inside of your nose and throat. Sweat runs into your eyes, stinging sharply, and you squint against the bright glare of the sun reflecting off the pale stones. Every step is calculated, every grip adjusted to avoid tumbling backward down the slope. The men around you move in slow, mechanical rhythm, groaning under their burdens, faces streaked with sweat and dust, lips cracked and bleeding. Historical fact: archaeological evidence shows that ramp systems were often constructed alongside the wall to transport stones from quarries. These ramps were steep and perilous, making accidents and injuries extremely common. Scholars still debate whether the risks were fully understood by the emperor or considered an acceptable cost of rapid construction. Standing here, you feel that cost with every trembling step. A boy stumbles beside you, his small frame nearly collapsing under the weight of the stone. The overseer cracks his bamboo rod, striking him sharply across the back, forcing him upright. His eyes are wide with terror, but he continues, knowing that stopping could mean death. You push forward too, gritting your teeth against fatigue, imagining how far the wall stretches and how little your effort will be remembered. Quirky tidbit. Some workers claimed that if they pressed a small coin or talisman into the mortar beneath a stone, it would bring good luck or at least spare them from misfortune. You have long since given up such superstitions, but sometimes, absent-mindedly, you imagine sliding something small into the crevices before placing a stone. A tiny defiance against the wall that seems to devour men whole. By mid-morning, the sun presses down with merciless heat. The stone you carry radiates the absorbed warmth, making each lift feel as though you are holding a burning slab against your chest. Your arms feel hollow, your back taut and screaming. The dust in the air coats your lungs, making each breath an effort, each exhalation a rasping plea for relief. The rhythm continues. Climb, dump, descend, repeat. Occasionally a man collapses mid-slope, his basket tumbling down, and the overseers swoop down like predators. Men rise, grunting, and resume their labour, driven by terror, exhaustion, and the stark necessity to survive. You force yourself forward, muscles shaking violently, wishing for a moment's respite that will not come. Historical fact. Chin labourers were provided minimal food and water, often just enough to survive another day. Mortality rates were high, with many dying from heat stroke, exhaustion or injury. Scholars still debate whether villages nearby willingly supplied provisions or were coerced into it. For you, the reality is immediate. Every ration, every sip of water is life itself. By noon, the sweat-soaked tunic clings painfully to your skin. The slope stretches ahead like an endless, cruel horizon. You glance at distant mountains shimmering in the heat, imagining the world beyond the wall. A pang of longing hits your chest. Memories of home, the warmth of fire, laughter, and familiar voices. Yet there is no time for nostalgia. The stone awaits, the slope demands, and the overseers never rest. Quirky detail. Some men whisper about the wall's breath, a phenomenon where heat and wind swirl around the stones, making it feel as though the structure itself is alive, watching, judging. You feel it now, a faint draught carrying dust and grit that seems almost sentient. Afternoon labour is the cruelest stretch. The air shimmers with heat, and every motion feels like moving underwater through molten stone. Your hands ache, your shoulders burn, and every inhalation carries fine grit that scratches your throat raw. Men stagger and stumble, sometimes collapsing entirely, only to be prodded forward by the overseer's relentless rods. Evening brings slight relief from the sun, but the stones retain their heat, radiating it into the ground, your feet, your hands, your very bones. The line of workers moves like shadows, ghostly figures haunted by fatigue and fear. You collapse into the dirt when allowed, trembling, too weak to eat, too exhausted even to speak. Around you, others share the same fate, silent and hollow-eyed, as the wall stretches ever higher above them, unconcerned, unfeeling, eternal. Historians still argue whether the emperor's goal was purely defensive or also intended to intimidate and control the population through forced labour. From here, the scale of the wall, the staggering human cost, and the relentless nature of the work seem to confirm both theories. Survival is not about choice, it is about endurance, fear, and sheer stubbornness. Night finally falls, though it brings only slight relief. The slope cools marginally, but the stones still radiate warmth, pressing against your aching muscles like the memory of every blow endured. You close your eyes and drift towards sleep, imagining the rhythm of stone, slope, rod, breath. repeating endlessly. The wall moves forward, indifferent, and you are merely a shadow feeding its relentless rise. Dawn stretches slowly across the mountains, painting the horizon in pale, bleeding shades of pink and orange. You wake with a start, though it's less waking and more being dragged upright by exhaustion, your body stiff and sore from yesterday's labour. Muscles twitch involuntarily, as if your own limbs have forgotten their purpose. Dust from the previous climb coats your hair, your arms, and even the back of your throat, making each swallow a scratchy, bitter reminder of yesterday's toil. The whistle cuts through the air, high-pitched and insistent, piercing the haze like a blade. You push yourself up, muscles groaning in protest, and shoulder your stone. Hesitation is impossible here. Every second counts, and one misstep can mean punishment or worse. The slope before you rises steeply, a silent predator demanding constant motion. Dust swirls around your feet in miniature tornadoes, and the stones radiate heat absorbed from the sun, making each lift feel as though you're clutching molten rock against your chest. Sweat pours freely down your back, arms and legs, mixing with dirt into a rough paste that sticks painfully to your skin. The men around you move in slow, mechanical rhythm, their faces pale, lips cracked, and eyes hollow, bodies trembling from the combined weight of stone, sun, and relentless labour. Historical fact. The Qin dynasty employed a mixture of peasants, convicts, and captured enemies for wall construction. Many were forced into labour without adequate clothing, food, or shelter, leading to high mortality rates. Scholars still debate the exact numbers, with estimates ranging from tens of thousands to potentially over 100,000 per year. Standing here, struggling with the unbearable weight, the statistics don't matter. You feel the reality in every groan, stumble, and strained muscle. You glance to your side. A boy, barely 14, is trying to hoist a stone nearly as large as his torso. His small hands tremble violently, and his pale face streaked with dust reflects pure terror. He drops it, and the overseer strikes him sharply with a bamboo rod. The boy collapses momentarily, then drags himself upright and resumes the climb, driven more by fear than any hope of survival. You tighten your grip on your own stone, imagining the pressure inside it isn't just rock, but the collective suffering of every soul who has ever laboured here. Quirky detail. Some men whisper that placing a coin or charm beneath a stone before laying it ensures protection or favours from unseen spirits. You have long since abandoned such practices, yet absent-mindedly, in moments of extreme desperation, you mutter a name into the rock as if the stone could carry your plea. For a heartbeat it feels like an ally, though the wall remains indifferent. By mid-morning the sun hangs high, merciless and oppressive. Each stone radiates heat back into your body, amplifying the strain on every muscle. Dust fills your lungs with each breath, scratching your throat, making every exhale a rasping effort. The line of workers moves steadily, a slow, synchronized dance of survival, punctuated by occasional groans and sharp cracks of bamboo rods from the overseers. One man falls mid-step, his basket crashes, scattering smaller stones down the slope. The overseers descend immediately, striking him to force compliance. He pushes himself upright and the rhythm continues. Historical fact. Archaeologists have found evidence of ramp systems built alongside sections of the wall, steep and treacherous paths that workers used to transport stone. Accidents were common, sometimes fatal. Scholars still debate whether the emperor considered these dangers inevitable or deliberately cruel. For you, the slope itself is punishment enough. By noon, Your tunic is soaked through with sweat, clinging to your skin painfully. Your muscles feel hollow, your back taut, lungs rasping. You glance toward the distant mountains, their peaks shimmering in heat, unreachable and serene compared to the hellish slope. Memories of home, warm kitchens, familiar laughter, the scent of cooking fires, flicker like ghosts, yet you have no time to dwell. Each stone demands attention, each step must be precise, each misstep punished. Quirky detail. Some labourers claimed that the wall breathed, heat and wind swirling in strange patterns that seemed almost sentient, watching and judging each worker. Today you feel it, a faint draught of swirling dust and heat, teasing your senses, reminding you that the wall is a living monument in its own merciless way. Afternoon brings no mercy. Dust and heat combine into a suffocating haze, every movement magnified by exhaustion. Your hands blister, your arms quiver, and your back feels as though it's splitting under the constant strain. Men collapse in succession, some crumpling entirely, only to be prodded upright by overseers wielding bamboo rods. The wall rises above you, indifferent to each groan, each heartbeat, each desperate effort. Each stone seems heavier than the last, as if absorbing the suffering of those who came before. Evening comes as a slight relief. The air cools just a fraction, though the stones retain warmth, pressing into your muscles like a reminder of everything endured. You stumble into the camp, collapsing alongside other exhausted men. Some are silent, some whisper low prayers. Others simply lie still, eyes closed, listening to the distant echoes of stone and rods. The wall stretches beyond sight, growing taller and wider, a testament to endurance forced under the most unyielding conditions. Historians still debate whether the psychological terror imposed on labourers was a deliberate method of control or a byproduct of environmental and logistical pressures. Standing here, feeling every fibre of your being strain under stone and sun, it's impossible to separate the two. The labour is both control and consequence, and survival depends not on skill or merit, but on fear, endurance, and stubborn, sometimes desperate hope. Night arrives finally, a fragile balm against the day's relentless heat. You lie on the rough earth, trembling from exhaustion, dust settling into every crease of skin. The wall towers above, indifferent, eternal, as your eyelids close and drift towards sleep. You imagine the rhythm, stone, slope, rod, breath, repeating endlessly. The wall moves forward, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are but a shadow feeding its rise, a single thread in its vast, unending story. The day begins with a stubborn, oppressive light that crawls over the mountains like molten wax, forcing your eyes open before your body has fully accepted the concept of movement. You wake on the rough earth, limbs trembling, skin slick with dried sweat, and dust from yesterday's toil. The whistle pierces the early morning, sharp and unforgiving, slicing through the haze. Instinctively you haul yourself upright and lift your stone onto your shoulders. There is no time for hesitation. Every pause invites punishment, and the slope waits, indifferent and merciless. The climb is more grueling than the previous days, if that's even possible. Each step on the dirt ramp feels like wading through molten lead. Dust whirls around your feet, sticking to the sweat-soaked tunic clinging to your back. Stones beneath your hands radiate heat like the core of a furnace, and every muscle screams in protest. The men around you shuffle forward in ghostly unison, lips cracked and bleeding, eyes wide with exhaustion and despair. One man collapses mid-step only to be dragged upright by the overseer's bamboo rod. You push forward as well, though your body trembles violently, threatening to betray you at every incline. Historical fact. Sections of the Great Wall employed an intricate system of ramps and pulleys to transport massive stones from quarries to the construction site. These ramps were steep, treacherous, and often collapsed, causing serious injury or death. Scholars still argue whether these methods were chosen for efficiency or simply because the labourers' lives were considered expendable. Standing here, you feel both the efficiency and the cruelty intertwined in every step. You glance to your side. A boy, barely 14, struggles with the stone that seems impossibly large for his frame. He stumbles, and the overseer strikes him sharply, forcing him upright. His small frame shakes, but he resumes climbing, driven by fear and the primal need to survive. You tighten your grip on your own load, heart hammering, imagining the stone absorbing not only your weight, but the accumulated suffering of all the labourers before you. Quirky detail. Some whisper that pressing a small talisman or coin beneath the stone before placing it brings luck or protection from misfortune. You have long since stopped, yet occasionally mutter a name under your breath, a silent act of defiance or hope against the indifference of the wall. By mid-morning the sun is unrelenting. Stones radiate heat back into your body, amplifying every ache and cramp. Dust fills your lungs with each inhale, burning your throat and making every exhale a rasping effort. The labour continues in a steady rhythm. Climb, dump, descend, punctuated by groans, coughs, and the sharp crack of bamboo rods striking bare skin. One man falls, his basket spilling stones down the slope. Overseers descend immediately, striking him until he rises and continues. You force yourself to move, muscles trembling violently, driven by fear, stubbornness, and the faint hope that the day will end. Historical fact. The Qin dynasty's labour force included peasants, criminals, and prisoners of war. Food rations were minimal, often just enough to survive another day, and water was tepid, gritty, and scarce. Scholars still debate whether villages supplied provisions willingly or were coerced. For you, survival is immediate. Every ration, every sip of water is a matter of life and death. By noon, your sweat-soaked tunic clings painfully to your skin. Every muscle feels hollowed, every step a negotiation with your body. You glance at distant mountains shimmering in heat, imagining freedom and normal life, simple pleasures long forgotten, warm meals, laughter, and safety. Yet nostalgia is a dangerous indulgence. The stones wait, the overseer's demand, and the slope gives no quarter. Quirky detail. Workers speak of the wall's breath, where heat and wind swirl as if the structure itself observes each labourer. Today you feel it, the swirl of dust and heat crawling along your skin, an almost sentient reminder of the wall's presence, silent, massive, and unyielding. Afternoon drags in slow, grueling waves. Each motion feels like wading through molten rock, and every breath carries gritty dust that scratches the throat raw. Blisters form on your hands, arms quiver uncontrollably. Men collapse in sequence, only to be prodded upright and driven onward by the overseer's rods. The wall rises above you, indifferent to every cry, every fall, every heartbeat. Each stone place seems heavier than the last, imbued with the suffering of countless men who have laboured before you. Evening brings faint relief. The slope cools slightly, though stones retain their heat, pressing into muscles like a reminder of every strike endured. You stumble into camp, collapsing alongside other exhausted men. Some whisper prayers, others are silent, staring into the distance. The wall stretches endlessly, a testament to endurance, obedience, and relentless labour, growing taller and stronger while the labourers' bodies weaken and fade. Historians still debate whether the emperor's goal was solely defensive or also a method of control. From here, seeing the scale, human cost, and unrelenting labour, both purposes seem intertwined. Survival depends on fear, endurance, and the fragile spark of hope that you may yet endure another day. Night falls, bringing minimal relief. The stones retain heat, pressing into the body and reminding you that labour never truly ceases. You lie on the earth, trembling, dust settling into your hair, and drift towards sleep. The rhythm repeats in your mind: stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. The wall grows, unfeeling, and you are but one shadow feeding its rise, one thread in its vast, unending story. The morning arrives in a soft, muted haze, though the calm is deceptive, a temporary pause before the slope and stone resume their relentless dominion. You wake with every muscle stiffened into painful rigidity, joints aching as if they have been bound by invisible chains overnight. Dust from yesterday clings to your skin, forming a thin, coarse layer that scratches with every movement. The whistle pierces the air, a shrill commanding note that cuts through the quiet, and instantly you are upright, stone in hand, ready to face the unyielding climb once more. Hesitation is not an option. Survival here is a measure of obedience and endurance. The slope seems steeper today, as though it has grown overnight to challenge your exhausted body. Dust swirls around your feet, fine particles sticking to sweat-slicked skin and stinging your eyes with each step. Stones radiate heat, amplifying every ache in your muscles, every pang of fatigue. Around you, men move mechanically, faces drawn, eyes glassy with exhaustion, mouths cracked from the unrelenting sun and dust-filled air. Occasionally one falters mid-step. A bamboo rod snaps against his back and he stumbles forward, pain fused with the sheer will to survive. You tighten your grip on your own stone, every breath a struggle, every motion a negotiation with your body. Historical fact. Archaeological studies suggest that during Qin Shi Huang's reign, labourers were often pressed into constructing the wall without adequate food, water, or protective clothing. Heat stroke, frostbite, and accidents were common. Scholars still debate the precise number of deaths, with estimates ranging from tens of thousands to over 100,000 annually. You don't need numbers to understand the reality. Your muscles ache, your lungs burn, and every step seems to take a lifetime. A young boy, no older than 14, struggles beside you trying to lift a stone nearly as large as himself. He falters, and the overseer strikes him sharply, forcing him to rise again. His eyes brim with terror, yet he continues, driven not by courage, but by the primal instinct to survive. You watch him, heart heavy, knowing that the wall consumes all equally: strength, youth, and despair. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered about placing coins or talismans beneath stones to bring luck or protection. You have long abandoned such rituals, but in moments of desperation, you mutter a name under your breath, a faint act of defiance, as if the stone itself might shield you even for a heartbeat. By mid-morning, the sun is unrelenting. Stones radiate heat, the air around the slope thick with dust, sweat, and the metallic scent of effort. Each breath burns your lungs, each motion exhausts every fibre of your body. The rhythm of labour, climb, dump, descend, continues in hypnotic, punishing repetition. One man collapses mid-slope, basket tumbling down. Overseers descend swiftly, bamboo rods snapping, forcing him upright again. You keep moving, though muscles quiver, strength waning, relying on sheer force of will. Historical fact. Sections of the wall incorporated steep ramps and rudimentary pulleys to transport massive stones from quarries. These structures often collapsed, injuring workers. Scholars debate whether efficiency or expendable labour motivated these designs. You feel both the ingenuity and the cruelty in every step, each stone a reminder of human endurance tested to the extreme. By noon, sweat drips freely into your eyes, soaking tunic and forming a gritty paste on skin. Your muscles feel hollow, your back taut, lungs rasping. You glance at distant mountains, shimmering and serene, imagining life beyond the wall. Memories of home flicker, warm fires, laughter, meals shared, voices calling your name. Nostalgia is dangerous. You tuck it away, for focus is survival, and every stone, every step, demands absolute attention. Quirky detail. Workers described the breath of the wall, a swirling heat and wind that felt almost sentient. You sense it now, the dust and warmth curling along your skin like invisible fingers, reminding you that the wall is alive in its own relentless way. Afternoon stretches interminably. Each motion feels as though wading through molten rock. Blisters form on hands, arms quiver uncontrollably. Men collapse, only to be driven onward by overseers. The wall towers above, indifferent to suffering, absorbing each drop of sweat, each groan, each fall. Every stone feels heavier than the last, each step a testament to endurance and despair. Evening brings slight relief. The slope cools marginally, but the stones retain warmth, pressing against muscles like a memory of every blow endured. You stumble into the camp, collapsing with other exhausted men. Silence hangs. A few whisper prayers, some stare blankly. The wall stretches beyond sight, a monument of endurance, obedience and suffering growing while labourers weaken. Historians debate whether this labour was intended solely for defence or as psychological control. Seeing the scale, human cost and relentless pace, both reasons seem valid. Survival depends on fear, endurance, and the fragile hope that tomorrow might bring something easier, even as the wall itself seems eternal and indifferent. Night descends. The stones remain warm, pressing into your muscles, a constant reminder that the work is never truly done. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease of skin, and drift towards sleep. You imagine the rhythm of labour, stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. The wall grows unfeeling, unstoppable, and you are a shadow feeding its rise, one thread in its vast, unending story. The sun rises with a lazy stubbornness, spilling light across the mountains that glints off the pale stones like 1,000 tiny eyes watching your every move. You wake with a groan, limbs stiff, muscles screaming from the accumulated days of labour. Dust crusts your hair, your face, your arms. The grit sticks uncomfortably to every sweat-slicked inch of skin. The whistle cuts through the thin morning air, shrill and unforgiving, and instantly your body obeys, hauling the stone onto your shoulders. Hesitation here is not just dangerous, it is impossible. Every second counts. The slope looms before you like a living thing, steep, unyielding, almost aware of your weakness. Dust swirls around your feet in miniature whirlwinds, coating eyes and lungs with its gritty weight. The stones in your hands radiate heat from the sun, pressing into your body. each lift a negotiation between your body and the relentless terrain. Around you, men move like automata, pale faces, cracked lips, and hollow eyes reflecting the fatigue that you feel deep in your bones. One man stumbles. The overseer strikes him with a bamboo rod, forcing him upright to continue. You push forward despite trembling limbs, each step a triumph over sheer exhaustion. Historical fact. The wall's construction relied on labour from peasants, criminals, and prisoners of war. Many worked without proper clothing, shelter, or food, making heat stroke, frostbite, and accidents inevitable. Scholars still debate the total mortality rate, but the evidence of hardship is clear in the archaeological record and in the stories that trickle down through history. Standing here, the toll is immediate and visceral. You can feel it in every strained muscle, every rasping breath. You glance at the boy next to you, barely 14, struggling to lift a stone almost as large as himself. He falters, and the overseer strikes him sharply, yet he forces himself upright, driven by fear and the instinct to survive. You imagine the stone absorbing not only your weight, but also the suffering of countless others who have laboured here. The wall is alive in its own way, a silent monument to endurance, fear, and indifference. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered about embedding small coins or charms beneath the stones to gain luck or protection. You have long abandoned such rituals, yet occasionally, in desperate moments, you murmur a name under your breath, as if the stone itself could respond, a tiny act of defiance against the wall's indifferent weight. By mid-morning the sun presses down relentlessly. Dust fills the air in your lungs, heat radiates from the stones, and every step drains strength from your body. The labour rhythm, climb, dump, descend, continues unbroken, broken only by groans and the sharp cracks of bamboo rods. Men collapse, others struggle to continue, forced onward by overseers. One man falls entirely, his basket scattering stones down the slope. Overseers descend immediately, striking him, ensuring he rises. You continue, muscles quivering, relying on fear, willpower, and stubborn hope to survive another day. Historical fact. Archaeological studies suggest that ramps and rudimentary pulley systems were used to transport stones from quarries. These methods were treacherous, and many workers fell to injury or death. Scholars still argue whether efficiency or disregard for human life motivated these designs. Each step on this slope makes the truth undeniable. Survival here demands more than strength. It demands endurance beyond reason. By noon, your tunic is soaked, sweat and dust forming a rough paste on skin. Muscles feel hollow, your back taut, lungs rasping painfully. You glance at distant mountains, their peaks shimmering in heat, imagining life beyond the wall. Home, warmth, laughter, simple meals. Nostalgia is a dangerous indulgence, distracting from the constant demand of stone and slope. Focus is survival, and every stone, every movement, is a battle with your own body. Quirky detail. The breath of the wall, whispered about by labourers, seems almost real today. Swirling heat and dust curl around your skin, as if the structure itself observes, judging your every movement. It is a reminder that the wall is alive in its own way, indifferent yet present, a silent sentinel over human suffering. Afternoon stretches interminably. Each motion feels like wading through molten rock, every inhalation filled with gritty dust scratching your throat raw. Hands blister, arms shake uncontrollably. Men collapse, only to be driven onward by overseers wielding bamboo rods. The wall rises above you, indifferent, absorbing sweat, groans and fear, stone by stone. Each block seems heavier than the last, weighed down by the history of labourers past. Evening brings slight relief. The air cools marginally, though the stones retain warmth, pressing against your muscles like a reminder of every strike endured. You stumble into the camp, collapsing with other men. Silence reigns. Some whisper prayers, some stare blankly, lost in fatigue. The wall stretches endlessly, a monument of endurance, obedience and suffering, growing while the labourers weaken. Historians still argue whether forced labour served only defensive purposes or also functioned as psychological control. Standing here, witnessing the scale, human cost, and relentless pace, both interpretations seem plausible. Survival depends not on skill, but on fear, endurance, and the fragile spark of hope that tomorrow might be slightly less cruel, though the wall itself remains eternal and indifferent. Night descends, providing minimal relief. Stones press warmth into your exhausted body, a constant reminder of work that never truly ceases. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease, drifting towards sleep. You imagine the rhythm: stone, slope, rod, breath. Endless, unfeeling. The wall grows, unstoppable, and you are a shadow feeding its rise, one thread in its vast, unending story. Dawn spreads slowly over the mountains, a reluctant light spilling across the slope, revealing the pale, jagged stones and the exhausted line of workers before you. You wake with a dull, unrelenting ache radiating from every muscle. Each joint feels as though it has been tied with cords overnight, stiff and unyielding. Dust from yesterday clings to your skin and hair, gritty and abrasive, making each breath rasp through your throat. The whistle cuts sharply through the morning stillness, piercing your foggy consciousness and demanding action. Your body obeys instinctively. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, legs quivering, every movement a negotiation with sheer exhaustion. Hesitation here is fatal. The slope rises before you like a cruel living thing, indifferent to your suffering. Dust swirls around your feet, making each step slippery and uncertain. The stones you carry radiate heat from the sun, burning into your shoulders and back, amplifying every strain, every ache. Men around you move in ghostly mechanical rhythm, their faces pale and streaked with dust and sweat. One man falters, and the overseer's bamboo rod snaps sharply against his back, forcing him upright. You tighten your grip on your stone, every breath a struggle, muscles threatening to betray you at every incline. Historical fact: sections of the Great Wall were built using labour from peasants, criminals, and prisoners of war, often under brutal conditions. Malnutrition, exposure, and accidents claimed countless lives. Scholars still debate the exact death toll, with the estimates varying widely, but you feel the weight of the numbers in every bone and tendon. Survival is not a matter of choice. It is a matter of endurance. Beside you, a boy no older than 14 struggles to lift a stone almost as big as his body. He stumbles, the overseer cracks his rod sharply, and he rises again, driven by fear alone. You imagine the stone absorbing not only your burden, but the suffering of all those who have laboured before, their anguish embedded in each rough surface. The wall is alive in its own way, indifferent yet aware, a silent witness to human struggle. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered about embedding coins or small talismans beneath stones, believing it would bring luck or ward off misfortune. You long abandoned such rituals, yet occasionally, in moments of desperation, you mutter a name under your breath. hoping for a whisper of protection from the unfeeling wall. By mid-morning, the sun is merciless. Each stone radiates heat into your aching muscles. Dust infiltrates lungs, stings eyes, and coats every exposed surface of your skin. The rhythm continues, climb, dump, descend, broken only by groans and the sharp cracks of bamboo rods. One man collapses mid-slope, stones tumble down. Overseers strike him, forcing him upright again. You continue, muscles quivering, relying on fear, endurance, and the faint hope of surviving another day. Historical fact. Archaeologists have documented ramp systems and pulley mechanisms used to transport stones. These structures were treacherous, and many workers suffered fatal accidents. Scholars debate whether these methods were chosen for efficiency or because the labourers were expendable. Each step along the slope confirms both the ingenuity of construction and the cruelty of its execution. By noon, your sweat-soaked tunic clings to your body painfully, muscles hollowed and taut. You glance toward distant mountains, shimmering in heat, imagining a life beyond the wall, warmth, laughter, meals, freedom. Nostalgia is dangerous. Focus is survival. Every stone, every movement demands full attention. Quirky detail. The breath of the wall, swirling heat and dust, seems almost sentient, curling around skin and bones, a reminder that this monument is both alive and indifferent, observing each labourer's struggle without judgment. Afternoon drags in waves of unrelenting exhaustion. Every motion feels as if wading through molten stone. Hands blister, arms shake uncontrollably. Men collapse only to be driven onward by overseers. The wall towers above, absorbing sweat, groans, and fear. Each stone seems heavier than the last, each step a testament to endurance, obedience, and despair. Evening brings slight relief. Stones retain warmth, pressing against muscles like a memory of every blow endured. You stumble into the camp, collapsing with other exhausted men. Some whisper prayers, others stare blankly. The wall stretches endlessly, a monument to human endurance and suffering growing while labourers weaken. Historians still debate whether forced labour served solely defensive purposes or also as psychological control. Witnessing the wall's scale, human cost and unyielding pace, both reasons appear true. Survival depends on fear, endurance, and a fragile hope that tomorrow might be less cruel, though the wall remains eternal, indifferent, and unfeeling. Night falls. Stones retain heat, pressing against your exhausted body. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease. Sleep arrives reluctantly, a fragile respite. You imagine the rhythm, stone, slope, rod, breath, endless, eternal. The wall continues its unfeeling rise, and you are one shadow feeding its growth, a single thread in its vast, unending story. Dawn creeps across the mountains like molten honey, slow, golden, reluctant. You wake with a deep ache that radiates from every joint and muscle, a reminder that days of relentless labour have not spared even the smallest fibres of your body. Dust clings stubbornly to your sweat-slick skin, forming gritty patches that scratch with every movement. The familiar whistle cuts through the morning air, piercing the stillness and immediately dragging your body into motion. With trembling arms, you lift the stone onto your shoulders. Hesitation is not an option. Here, even a heartbeat of pause can be punished. You take a shallow breath, tasting grit and heat, and begin the climb, your every step a negotiation with pain and exhaustion. The slope before you feels impossibly steep, sharper than yesterday, rougher underfoot, as if the wall itself conspires to sap your strength. Dust swirls in the early light, catching in the air in your eyes, coating your lungs with grit with each inhale. The stones radiate heat from the sun, searing into your back and shoulders. Around you, men move with the same mechanical precision, ghostly shadows of human form, their pale faces streaked with sweat and dust, eyes hollow and trembling. One man falters. The overseer's bamboo rod snaps sharply across his back, forcing him upright. You tighten your grip, muscles quivering, heart hammering with every effort. Historical fact. Large portions of the Great Wall were built using forced labour, including peasants, convicts, and captured prisoners. Many worked without proper clothing, shelter, or sufficient food, leading to high mortality rates. Scholars still debate the exact numbers, but tens of thousands likely perished during peak construction. Here, the numbers are less important than the immediacy of exhaustion and fear that weigh upon your body like the stones themselves. Beside you, a boy, barely 14, struggles with a stone that seems far too heavy for his frame. He falters and the overseer strikes him sharply, a cruel reminder of the consequences of weakness. Trembling, he rises, driven by pure instinct, moving forward despite fear, despite pain. You watch, heart sinking, imagining the stone absorbing not only your burden, but the sorrow of countless labourers before you, the wall silently swallowing the grief of ages. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered that placing coins or charms beneath stones brought luck or divine protection. You abandoned such rituals long ago, but sometimes, in moments of despair, you mutter a name under your breath, a faint hope that even the wall might grant a small mercy, if only for a moment. By mid-morning the sun presses down unrelentingly. Each stone radiates heat, burning your muscles. Dust fills your lungs, scratches your throat and makes every exhale rasp. The labour rhythm, climb, dump, descend, proceeds in hypnotic, punishing repetition. A man collapses mid-slope, his basket spilling stones. Overseers descend immediately, striking him until he rises. You continue, quivering, relying on fear, stubbornness, and a faint glimmer of hope. Historical fact. Archaeological evidence suggests that ramps and pulleys were employed to move massive stones from quarries to the wall. These methods were treacherous, resulting in frequent accidents. Scholars debate whether the risk was considered a necessary evil or an acceptable cost of labour. Each step along the slope confirms both. You feel efficiency and cruelty entwined, a dual legacy written in sweat and blood. By noon, your tunic is soaked through with sweat, forming a gritty paste on skin. Muscles feel hollowed and taut, lungs rasp painfully. You glance at distant mountains shimmering in heat, imagining a life outside the wall. Warm kitchens, laughter, soft beds, freedom. Nostalgia is dangerous. Indulgence might slow your pace and invite punishment. Focus is survival. Each stone, each careful step demands your full attention. Quirky detail. Workers often describe the wall breathing, a phenomenon where heat and wind swirl together as if the structure itself is alive. Today, you feel it, the wind twisting around your body, dust curling into your hair and eyes, a reminder that this monument, though inanimate, dominates your life like a living entity. Afternoon stretches interminably. Each motion feels like wading through molten rock, every inhalation scraping against grit-filled lungs. Hands blister, arms shake uncontrollably. Men collapse, only to be prodded upright by overseers wielding bamboo rods. The wall towers above, absorbing sweat, groans, fear, and despair. Each stone weighs heavier than the last, imbued with the suffering of countless predecessors, their pain echoing in your muscles and joints. Evening brings minor relief. The slope cools marginally, but the stones retain warmth, pressing painfully into your muscles, a reminder of every strike endured. You stumble into the camp, collapsing alongside other exhausted men. Silence dominates. Whispers of prayer punctuate the night. Some stare blankly into distance. The wall stretches endlessly, a monument to obedience, endurance, and suffering, growing while labourers weaken. Historians debate whether forced labour served purely defensive purposes or as a form of psychological control. Standing here, witnessing the scale, human cost, and relentless pace, both seem plausible. Survival does not depend on skill. It relies on fear, endurance, and the fragile hope that another sunrise will bring a day you might endure. Night descends. Stones press warmth into your exhausted body. You lie on the rough earth trembling, dust settling into every crease. You drift towards sleep, the rhythm of labour echoing in your mind. Stone, slope, rod, breath, endless, eternal. The wall rises unfeeling, unstoppable, and you are one shadow among many, feeding its growth, a single thread in its vast, unending story. The first light of morning seeps over the jagged ridges like molten amber, soft and deceptive. You wake with a dull ache radiating through every muscle, every joint, as if your body has been kneaded by invisible hands in the night and left to stiffen into discomfort. Dust from yesterday clings stubbornly to your hair, eyebrows and face, forming gritty lines that scratch with each breath. Your arms tremble involuntarily as you sit up, the familiar soreness rolling across shoulders and lower back. The whistle pierces the quiet, shrill and insistent, forcing your attention into sharp focus. With shaking hands, you lift the stone that has already become an extension of your body, each breath tasting of grit, sweat, and the faint tang of metal from the stone's edges. Survival is immediate, tangible, and merciless. There is no time to adjust, no room for hesitation. The slope before you looks steeper than ever, shadows casting deceptive angles that make your footing uncertain. Dust swirls around your feet with each step, catching in eyes and inhaled with each ragged breath. Heat radiates off the stones already baked by the weak morning sun, pressing into your back and shoulders as if the wall itself conspires to slow you down. Around you, men move in the same mechanical rhythm, pale, drawn faces, cracked lips and trembling limbs, ghosts of their former selves driven by fear and habit. One man stumbles. A sharp crack of bamboo from the overseer's hand snaps him upright, forcing him forward. You tighten your grip on your own stone, muscles quivering, heart hammering, every motion a delicate negotiation between will and bodily betrayal. Historical fact. Sections of the Great Wall were constructed using forced labour from peasants, convicts, and prisoners of war. Food rations were sparse, and protective clothing was often non-existent, making exhaustion, injury, and heatstroke constant threats. Scholars still debate the exact mortality rates, but tens of thousands likely perished over the course of major construction campaigns. Each step along the slope confirms that the wall's creation demanded endurance beyond human reason. A boy, no older than 14, struggles beside you with a stone that is clearly too heavy for his frame. He falters, and the overseer strikes him sharply. He rises again, eyes wide and terrified, driven not by courage but by the primal instinct to survive. You watch him, heart tight, imagining the stone absorbing not only his weight, but the accumulated suffering of countless labourers before him. The wall is indifferent, monumental, yet almost alive in the way it dominates every sense, every movement, quirky detail. Some workers believed that pressing small talismans or coins under the stones would bring luck or protection from misfortune. You stopped doing it long ago, but occasionally, in moments of desperation, you murmur a name under your breath, a faint act of defiance and hope against the relentless structure of the wall. By mid-morning the sun presses down, even in its early stage, baking dust into your lungs and skin. The rhythm, climb, dump, descend, continues with hypnotic, punishing repetition. One man collapses. The overseers descend, rods snapping, forcing him upright. You push on, muscles quivering violently, relying on stubbornness, fear, and a faint glimmer of hope that today's climb will eventually end. Historical fact. Archaeological evidence indicates that ramps and pulleys were used to transport stones from quarries to the construction site. But these mechanisms were often unstable and dangerous. Scholars still debate whether the risk was considered a necessary evil or an acceptable cost. Standing here, each step reinforces both truths, ingenuity built upon human suffering. By noon, sweat soaks your tunic, dust forming gritty layers on your skin. Your back aches, muscles hollow and taut, lungs rasping painfully. You glance at distant peaks shimmering in heat, imagining life outside the wall. Warm meals, laughter, safe beds, freedom. Nostalgia is a dangerous indulgence. Focus is survival. Every stone, every careful step demands total attention. Quirky detail. The wall was said to breathe by labourers, the swirling heat and dust twisting around bodies like a living presence. You sense it now, the swirl curling over your skin and muscles, a constant reminder that this structure, though inanimate, dominates life in ways both subtle and absolute. Afternoon stretches like molten lead. Every motion feels like wading through molten rock. Hands blister, arms shake uncontrollably. Men collapse and are driven onward by the overseer's rods. The wall rises above, indifferent, absorbing sweat, groans, fear, and despair. Each stone feels heavier than the last, steeped in centuries of suffering, a burden that is both physical and spiritual. Evening brings minimal relief. Stones retain warmth, pressing against muscles as a reminder of every blow endured. You stumble into camp, collapsing with others. Silence dominates. Whispers of prayer punctuate the space, while some stare blankly into the distance. The wall stretches endlessly, a monument to endurance, obedience, and suffering. Historians still argue whether forced labour was purely for defence, or also a method of psychological control. Witnessing the scale, human cost, and relentless pace, both seem plausible. Survival relies not on skill, but on fear, endurance, and the fragile hope of making it through another day. Night finally descends. Stones press warmth into your exhausted body. Dust settles into every crease of skin as you lie on the rough earth, trembling, muscles screaming. Sleep comes reluctantly, a fragile pause, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. Relentless, eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are one shadow among many, feeding its vast, unending story. The morning sun presses down with an almost cruel insistence, turning the slope into a furnace of stone and dust. You wake stiff and sore, limbs reluctant to move, every muscle reminding you of yesterday's climb. Dust from the previous day still clings to your hair, your clothes, and every exposed inch of skin, gritty and abrasive, scratching against your sweat-slicked flesh with every motion. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, the familiar scrape and grind of granite against rough hands echoing in your mind, and start the slow march uphill. Even after days of labour, the sheer weight makes your arms tremble and your back arch in protest. Hesitation is impossible. Each step demands attention, precision, and endurance beyond what feels humanly reasonable. The slope seems steeper today, sharper, almost alive in its capacity to make each step treacherous. Loose stones shift beneath your feet, dust swirls into your lungs, and the heat radiates off the sun-baked stones. Your legs quiver as you step carefully, balancing the stone while keeping an eye on the terrain. Around you, men move with the mechanical rhythm of exhaustion. Pale faces, cracked lips, trembling limbs. Shadows of the people who started this work. One man stumbles on a loose rock, a sharp crack of the overseer's bamboo rod echoing, forcing him upright. You tighten your grip and push onward, muscles quivering, each step a battle between will and fatigue. Historical fact. Moving stones up steep slopes required ingenuity and sheer brute force. Archaeologists have documented ramps, pulleys, and lever systems, yet these mechanisms were primitive, unstable, and frequently caused injuries. Scholars still debate whether the methods prioritized efficiency or merely took advantage of expendable labor. You feel both truths in your bones. Each slope tests both your endurance and the wall's unyielding dominance over human life. A young boy struggles beside you carrying a stone nearly as large as his frame. His legs wobble beneath the weight, and his hands slip on the rough surface. The overseer strikes him sharply, forcing him upright. You glance at him with a pang of recognition. You see yourself reflected in his terror, his desperation, his determination to survive. The stone presses down, heavy and unyielding, almost absorbing the collective suffering of every labourer who has passed this way. Quirky detail. Some labourers claimed that placing coins or charms under stones would bring luck or protection. You stopped long ago, yet in moments of desperation, you mutter a name under your breath, a tiny act of defiance, as if the stone itself might shield you from misfortune. By mid-morning, the sun is relentless, and the heat radiates off the stones like a physical force. Each inhale brings dust and grit into your lungs, scratching and rasping, while each step presses heavily on exhausted legs. The rhythm, climb, dump, descend, continues unbroken. A man collapses mid-slope and the overseers descend immediately, bamboo rods snapping as he is forced to rise. You continue, quivering, relying on stubbornness, fear, and the faint hope of surviving another day. Historical fact. Sections of the wall were built on steep hills to maximize defensive advantage, but this terrain made stone transport extremely dangerous. Many workers suffered falls, crushed limbs, or heat exhaustion. Scholars still argue whether safety was even a consideration, or if labourers were viewed as expendable tools. Standing on the slope, you feel both the ingenuity of human engineering and the cruelty embedded in its execution. By noon, your tunic is soaked through with sweat, dust forming a rough paste on your skin. Muscles feel hollow and taut, lungs rasping painfully with every breath. You glance at distant mountains shimmering in heat, imagining a life beyond the wall. Warm meals, laughter, safe beds, freedom. Nostalgia is dangerous. It is a luxury you cannot afford. Focus is survival. Every stone, every careful step demands your full attention. Quirky detail. The walls seem to breathe according to labourers, heat and wind swirling together as if alive. Today you feel it clearly. Dust curling around your shoulders, wind brushing your sweat-drenched skin, an invisible presence that reminds you the wall is indifferent yet aware, dominating life and motion in a way that is almost sentient. Afternoon drags interminably. Each step feels like wading through molten stone. Hands blister, arms shake uncontrollably. Men collapse and are driven onward by overseers wielding bamboo rods. The wall towers above, indifferent, absorbing sweat, groans, and fear. Each stone seems heavier than the last, imbued with the labour and suffering of those who came before you. Evening brings only marginal relief. Stones retain warmth, pressing into your muscles as if to remind you of every blow endured. You stumble into camp with other men, bodies sagging with exhaustion. Silence dominates. Whispers of prayer punctuate the air, while some stare blankly at the ground. The wall stretches endlessly into shadows, monumental and indifferent. Historians still debate whether forced labour served solely defensive purposes or also functioned as psychological control. Seeing the scale, the human cost, and the relentless pace, both interpretations seem valid. Survival does not depend on skill, it depends on fear, endurance, and the fragile hope that tomorrow will not claim you. Night finally arrives. The stones, still warm from the day, press into your exhausted muscles. You lie on the rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease of your body. Sleep comes reluctantly, a fragile pause. The rhythm of labour, stone, slope, rod, breath, echoes in your mind, relentless, eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are one shadow among many, feeding its growth, a single thread in its vast, unending story. The morning begins with an almost unbearable heaviness, the kind that presses into your bones before your eyes even open. You wake with every muscle screaming, tendons taut, joints creaking, and a dull ache that seems to pulse in rhythm with your heartbeat. Dust still clings to your hair and skin from yesterday's climb, gritty and stubborn, a constant reminder that rest is fleeting and impermanent. You sit up slowly, groaning at the effort, and glance toward the slope. Already men are moving, each step measured, cautious and careful. Then the whistle pierces the morning air, shrill and merciless, and you know, hesitation is not tolerated here. You lift the familiar stone onto your shoulders, muscles trembling under its relentless weight. The slope stretches before you, steeper than ever in the early light, jagged, unyielding, and coated with loose rocks that threaten to betray each step. Sweat drips into your eyes, stinging, mixing with dust that scratches your throat and lips. Each footfall is calculated, yet the ground seems almost alive in its treachery, shifting beneath your weight. Around you, men move in pale, ghostly silence, their faces streaked with grime and exhaustion, eyes glassy with fatigue. One man's foot slips on a loose stone, and the overseer's bamboo rod snaps sharply across his back, cracking through the morning air. The sound makes your heart jump, a grim percussion to the relentless march. Historical fact. Overseers wielding bamboo rods were standard on Great Wall construction sites, tasked with enforcing discipline and productivity. Punishments for minor mistakes or slow labour could be harsh and immediate. Scholars still debate whether the brutality was meant purely for efficiency or also served as psychological control over labourers. Standing here, the effectiveness of fear is palpable. You feel it in every trembling muscle, every shallow, anxious breath. The man you were watching staggers to his feet, eyes wide, lips quivering. You notice the younger boys huddled nearby, faces pale, gripping stones far too large for their small frames. Their fear is almost tangible, a mix of instinctual terror and learned obedience. You clutch your own stone tighter, knuckles white, muscles taut, and continue, aware that even a small misstep might invite the overseer's wrath. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered about marking their stones with tiny scratches or symbols before placing them, a private rebellion, a small way to leave their presence on a wall that otherwise consumes identity. You think about doing the same, briefly tracing a line on a corner only to pause, aware that even the smallest act of defiance could provoke punishment. By mid-morning the sun climbs higher, relentless and punishing. The stones radiate heat, baking into your back and shoulders, lungs rasping with every inhale filled with dust. The rhythm, climb, dump, descend, continues unbroken, broken only by the sharp cracks of bamboo rods. One man collapses. Overseers strike him repeatedly until he rises again, trembling, stone still in hand. You continue, muscles quivering violently, heart pounding, relying on stubborn endurance, fear, and the faint hope that survival is still possible. Historical fact. Labourers on steep sections were sometimes forced to work in single-file lines, carrying stones up precarious ramps. Falls were common, often fatal. Scholars debate how much of the oversight focused on productivity versus maintaining control through terror. Observing the hierarchy now, you feel the wall's demands and the overseer's authority intertwined, an unholy alliance that leaves no room for mercy. By noon, sweat and dust form a rough paste on your skin, chafing and burning with each motion. Your muscles feel hollow, lungs rasping, and every step weighs on your back and shoulders as if gravity itself has doubled. You glance toward distant peaks shimmering in heat, imagining a life beyond the wall, warm kitchens, laughter, safety, freedom. Yet longing for such comforts is dangerous, a temptation that might cause hesitation and draw punishment. Focus is survival, and the weight of the stone reminds you that any lapse could be fatal. Quirky detail. Workers joked quietly that the overseers had an almost supernatural ability to appear wherever slacking occurred, a rumour meant to terrify. Sometimes you glance over your shoulder, half expecting the shadowed figure with the bamboo rod to materialise out of nowhere. It doesn't matter if it's real. The fear it inspires is enough to keep muscles taut and backs bent. Afternoon drags like molten lead. Every motion feels like wading through cement, arms trembling violently, hands blistering and raw. Men collapse, only to be driven forward by overseers wielding rods with unyielding persistence. The wall rises above you, monumental, absorbing groans, sweat, fear and despair. Each stone feels heavier than the last, steeped in the labour and suffering of countless predecessors. Evening brings minimal relief. The slope cools marginally, yet the stones retain warmth, pressing into muscles as a cruel reminder of every strike endured. You stumble into camp alongside other labourers, bodies sagging with exhaustion. Silence dominates. Whispers of prayer punctuate the night air, while some stare blankly into the distance, mind numb. The wall stretches endlessly into darkness, monumental and indifferent, unchanging despite the suffering below. Historians still debate whether the overseer's brutality was necessary for the wall's construction, or if it was primarily a method of psychological control. Witnessing the scale, human cost, and relentless pace, both arguments seem valid. Survival here relies not on skill or endurance alone, but also on navigating fear and punishment, balancing physical effort with careful vigilance. Night finally descends. Stones retain warmth from the day, pressing into your exhausted body. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease, every fold of your body. Sleep comes reluctantly, fragile and temporary, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling, unstoppable, and you are a shadow among many, feeding its growth, one thread in a vast, unending story of human endurance, suffering, and survival. The morning air is heavy with the scent of dust, sweat, and heat rising from the stones. You wake stiff and aching, your limbs reluctant to cooperate, every joint a reminder of yesterday's climb. You lift the stone onto your shoulders, hands raw and blistered, muscles quivering under its relentless weight. Around you, the line of labourers stirs in unison, pale, gaunt faces streaked with grime, eyes glassy with exhaustion and fear. The whistle shrieks, a sharp, piercing note cutting through the fragile calm, and immediately all movement becomes urgent, mechanical, compelled by both habit and terror. Hesitation could mean punishment. Even a moment's lapse could draw the overseer's rod. Today, the boys look particularly fragile, younger than most, faces tight with worry, lips pressed thin. They huddle close to the slope, eyes darting toward the overseers, searching for a sign, any indication of safety, but finding none. The fear in their eyes is raw, almost physical, a palpable presence that seems to weigh down the already unbearable load of stone and stone dust that presses into your lungs and muscles. You glance at one boy struggling with a block clearly too large for his frame. His hands shake violently, his knees wobble. The overseer's bamboo rod snaps the air beside him, forcing him upright. He gasps, tears mingling with dust on his cheeks, and moves forward, trembling. Historical fact. Many labourers on the Great Wall were young boys, sometimes as young as 12 or 13, pressed into service either as family duty, punishment, or conscription. Scholars still debate how much of the workforce consisted of children versus adults, but the presence of these young, terrified labourers is undeniable in accounts. Each step you take alongside them carries the weight of shared fear, a silent understanding that you all endure together, yet alone in your own suffering. Quirky detail. Some of the younger boys whispered small rhymes or sang quiet, nonsensical songs to stave off panic. You catch yourself humming one of their silly tunes under your breath, almost laughing at its absurdity even as your muscles scream in protest. The song is fragile armour against the relentless fatigue and terror. By mid-morning the sun climbs, relentless and baking. Stones radiate heat into your back and shoulders, lungs rasp with each inhale filled with dust. The rhythm, climb, dump, descend, continues with hypnotic relentlessness. You notice the boys faltering repeatedly. Some stop mid-step, hands gripping stone in a desperate attempt to regain balance. Overseers swing rods with frightening accuracy, striking where they must, maintaining a terror-fueled order. You tighten your grip on your own stone, aware that the fear of failure is almost as crushing as the physical load. Historical fact. Reports from chroniclers describe labourers fainting, sometimes for hours, only to be prodded awake and forced to continue. Scholars debate whether such punishment was strategic or purely punitive. You feel the truth of both in every step. The overseers exploit fear to maximize output, yet the wall's sheer scale seems to demand such brutal methods. By noon, sweat forms a thick, gritty paste on your skin. Muscles ache hollow and taut, lungs rasp painfully. You glance at distant mountains shimmering in heat, imagining warmth, laughter, and safety beyond the wall. But nostalgia is a dangerous luxury. Any thought that slows movement or draws attention is swiftly punished. You watch the boys press forward, small hands gripping large stones, legs quivering. Each falter, each hesitation is a risk, but perseverance is survival. Quirky detail. Some whispered that the wall itself watched labourers' mistakes, that stones shifted slightly if a worker's attention wavered, a superstition born of fear. You shake your head at the idea, yet the thought makes your hands tighten instinctively on the stone. Afternoon stretches into suffocating heat. Each movement is a battle, every stone heavier than the last. Blisters, raw palms, aching shoulders. These are the physical reminders of the day. Collapse is not permitted. Overseers move swiftly, rods snapping, eyes like hawks, ensuring the rhythm never ceases. The wall dominates, a vast, unfeeling presence absorbing groans, sweat, and fear. Evening brings marginal relief, shadows stretching long across the slope. Stones retain warmth, pressing into aching muscles, a reminder of every hour endured. You stumble into camp alongside the others. Silence dominates. Whispers of prayer float through the air, while some stare blankly into the distance, processing fear and fatigue in their own ways. The wall stretches endlessly, indifferent, monumental, a testament to both human perseverance and suffering. Historians still debate whether the use of child labour was necessary or a moral failure of the system. Witnessing the line of trembling boys, seeing the fatigue and terror mirrored in their eyes, you feel the weight of survival more than any abstract argument. Endurance here relies not only on physical strength but also on navigating the fragile boundary between fear, compliance, and hope. Night arrives finally. The stones remain warm, pressing into exhausted bodies. You lie on rough earth, muscles trembling, dust settling into every crease. Sleep comes reluctantly, fragile and temporary, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. Relentless, eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are a shadow among many, feeding its growth, one thread in its vast, unending story. The sun climbs high, relentless, turning the slope into a furnace of stone and dust. You wake stiff and aching, muscles still sore from yesterday's climb, back and shoulders screaming with every movement. Sweat beads on your forehead and drips into your eyes, mixing with the ever-present layer of dust that clings to your skin and hair. You lift the familiar stone onto your shoulders, the rough edges pressing sharply against blistered hands. The weight is both burden and rhythm, a pulse that sets the tempo for the day. Each step is deliberate, calculated, a negotiation with your aching body and the treacherous slope that seems almost alive in its capacity to challenge every footfall. Around you, men move like shadows, pale, drawn, eyes glazed with fatigue. Dust swirls into the air with each motion, catching the sunlight and forming a golden haze that scratches at your throat and lungs. The slope is steeper than it looks, loose stones shifting unpredictably beneath your feet. One man falters. The overseer's bamboo rod cracks sharply beside him, forcing him upright. You tighten your grip on the stone and continue, every muscle trembling, every heartbeat a countdown to the next pause, the next misstep that could cost more than exhaustion. Historical fact. Archaeological evidence shows that sections of the Great Wall were built under extreme conditions, with workers exposed to sun, wind, and dust for hours without relief. Scholars still debate whether the harsh environment was deliberately exploited to control labourers, or simply an unavoidable aspect of construction. Standing on the slope, you feel both truths pressing into your skin with each step. The boys struggle nearby, carrying stones far too heavy for their young frames. Their fear is palpable, infecting the rhythm of the group. You notice small hands gripping stones tightly, knuckles white, legs wobbling. Every slip is punished by overseers swinging rods with terrifying precision. One boy falters, and you see the tension in the overseer's shoulders, ready to strike. The boy rises again, trembling, driven by the instinct to survive. You glance at him, feeling a strange kinship. You too are barely holding on to sanity and strength. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered that inhaling dust deeply could toughen the lungs, a superstition passed down to make the choking, scratching air seem like a training ritual. You inhale anyway, grimacing, tasting grit and iron, feeling it coat your throat like sandpaper. It doesn't help, but it feels like small agency against the unrelenting wall. By mid-morning, the heat intensifies. Stones radiate warmth that presses into muscles already screaming from strain. Lungs rasp with every inhalation filled with dust, grit, and the faint tang of sweat. The rhythm, climb, dump, descend, continues unbroken, hypnotic, punishing. A man collapses, bamboo rods snapping beside him as overseers force him upright. You push on, quivering violently, muscles hollowed and taut, relying on endurance, fear, and hope that today's climb might end with your body intact. Historical fact. Sections of the wall were constructed on exposed ridges with no shade, making heat stroke and dehydration constant threats. Scholars still argue how much planning went into worker safety versus efficiency. Feeling the sun-baked stones under your feet and the dust coating every breath. Both possibilities feel real. By noon, sweat and dust form a thick abrasive layer on your skin. Muscles ache hollow and taut. Lungs rasp painfully. Each step a decision between survival and collapse. You glance at distant peaks shimmering in heat, imagining warmth, laughter, and a life beyond the wall. But longing for comfort is dangerous. It slows movement and invites punishment. Focus is survival, and the weight of stone demands complete attention. Quirky detail. Labourers sometimes claim the wall hummed under the sun, vibrations from the heat making stones feel almost alive. You feel it now, a subtle pulse beneath your feet, dust swirling around legs, wind brushing your skin, a reminder that this monument dominates both body and mind. Afternoon drags endlessly. Every motion is a battle. Arms shake violently, hands blistering. Men collapse but are forced onward by overseers wielding rods with unyielding precision. The wall towers above, monumental and indifferent, absorbing sweat, groans, and fear. Each stone seems heavier than the last, steeped in centuries of human labour and suffering. Evening brings marginal relief. Stones cool slightly, yet retain warmth, pressing into muscles as a reminder of every hour endured. You stumble into camp alongside others, bodies sagging from exhaustion. Silence dominates. Whispers of prayer fill the air, while some stare blankly at the ground, processing fear and fatigue in their own ways. The wall stretches endlessly, indifferent, monumental, absorbing every ounce of toil. Historians still debate whether harsh working conditions were a method of controlled or unavoidable consequence. Watching labourers collapse, seeing the struggle to maintain rhythm under the sun and dust, you feel both answers in your muscles and lungs. Survival relies not only on strength but on navigating the delicate balance between fear, endurance, and the fragile hope of completing another day. Night finally descends. Stones remain warm from the sun, pressing into exhausted muscles. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease of your body. Sleep comes reluctantly, a fragile pause, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. Relentless. Eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are one shadow among many, feeding its growth, a thread in a vast, unending story of human endurance, suffering, and survival. The morning starts deceptively calm, with a gentle breeze teasing your hair and the sun warm on your back. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, muscles screaming in protest, lungs rasping with the fine dust that seems to have settled permanently in your chest. The slope stretches upward, jagged, unyielding, and coated in loose gravel that threatens every step. Around you, labourers move in mechanical rhythm, pale faces streaked with sweat and dust, eyes glassy with fatigue. Then, almost imperceptibly, the wind begins to shift, carrying with it a damp metallic scent. By mid-morning, clouds gather on the horizon, dark and swollen, rolling in slowly but with an inevitability that sets your stomach taut. The first drops are hesitant, scattered, barely wetting dust that swirls into your eyes and throat. You blink, coughing, wiping grit away, trying to keep balance on the treacherous slope. The overseers shout, urging speed, warning of the dangers that rain can bring on this unstable terrain. Every stone you carry suddenly feels heavier, your arms trembling with the added tension of gripping wet, slippery granite. Historical fact. Rainstorms could make the already dangerous slopes nearly impassable, causing mudslides and rockfalls. Many workers were injured or killed during sudden weather changes. Scholars still debate how much planning or warning was given to labourers about impending storms, or if survival was purely left to luck and vigilance. Standing here, soaked to the skin, you feel both possibilities press into your muscles and lungs. The rain intensifies. It drives dust into mud, grit into a slippery paste, coating your hands and arms, making each grip precarious. Water seeps into your tunic, chilling your soaked skin against the sun-baked stones, creating a bizarre clash of heat and cold. You glance at the young boys struggling beside you, their small hands gripping stones slick with rain. Fear sharpens their movements, panic threatening to break their rhythm. One falters. The overseer cracks his bamboo rod across the wet stone, forcing the boy upright, the sound ringing sharp against the roar of the storm. You tighten your grip, muscles quivering, heart pounding, balancing terror, endurance, and the knowledge that a single misstep could send both you and your stone tumbling downward. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered that lightning was the wall's way of punishing laziness, striking where effort lagged. You glance nervously at jagged clouds, feeling as though each flash could target the weakest among you. The superstition is absurd, but it brings a small, almost comical relief amid relentless danger. A mental game to keep panic at bay. By noon, the storm is full and relentless. Rain falls in heavy sheets, turning paths into mud slopes, slick and treacherous. Stones slide and skid underfoot, threatening to topple men with a single misstep. You feel water running down your arms, through your clothes, chilling muscles already exhausted from constant strain. The wind howls through the ridges, lifting dust, grit, and mud into your eyes and mouth. The wall, monumental and indifferent, seems to amplify the storm, swallowing sound and focus, leaving only your labour and the roar of the elements. Historical fact. Archaeological studies suggest that builders sometimes had to stop construction during extreme storms, but many accounts indicate labourers were forced to continue regardless of conditions. Scholars still debate whether forcing work in storms was out of necessity or cruelty. You feel the tension in your arms, the risk in every step, the fine line between survival and disaster. Afternoon arrives, the storm unchanged. Mud clings to your boots and tunic, each movement requiring extraordinary attention. Men slip, stones slide, and overseers crack rods against rocks or backs to maintain pace. Your muscles burn from effort, damp cold making joints ache more sharply. Lightning flashes overhead, and thunder shakes the ridge. A young boy screams as a stone slides past him, nearly losing balance. He stumbles, catching himself on the wet slope. The overseer strikes with quick precision, a sharp, cruel punctuation to his panic. You press forward, heart racing, muscles trembling, every motion a negotiation with gravity, water, and fear. Quirky detail. Some labourers claimed that singing quietly during storms helped keep pace and morale. You murmur a line under your breath, a tiny rebellion against despair, a fragile defiance against the chaos of wind, rain, and weight. It doesn't change the danger, but gives a momentary anchor for the mind. By evening, the rain finally begins to ease, though the slope remains slick, mud and water still threatening to unbalance every step. The sun breaks through briefly, reflecting off wet stones, dazzling and harsh. You stumble into camp, drenched, exhausted, muscles trembling, lungs rasping. Men collapse wherever they can, some staring blankly, some whispering prayers. The wall stretches ahead, monumental, indifferent, and relentless. Historians still argue whether labourers' endurance in extreme conditions was a testament to human resilience or merely exploitation. Watching men struggle through storm, mud, and fear, you feel both interpretations in your soaked, aching muscles and trembling limbs. Survival relies on endurance, vigilance, and the faint hope of making it through another day. Night falls. Stones are slick and cold, pressing into exhausted bodies. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust and mud settling into every crease. Sleep comes reluctantly, fleeting, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. Relentless. Eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are one shadow among many, feeding its growth, a single thread in a vast, unending story. The morning begins with a brittle quiet, the storm having passed, leaving air heavy with the smell of wet stone, mud, and sweat. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, muscles trembling as if mocking your persistence, lungs rasping with every inhale of damp, gritty air. The slope stretches before you, jagged and steep, but for the first time in days your eyes wander upward and outward, trying to comprehend the monumental scale of what you are a part of. The wall towers above you, a sinuous stone serpent stretching endlessly over ridges and valleys, disappearing into haze on the horizon. It is at once awe-inspiring and suffocating, a physical testament to human ingenuity and human suffering, an almost living entity absorbing every ounce of labour, fear and exhaustion poured into it. Historical fact. The Great Wall, in its various sections, stretches thousands of miles across northern China, constructed over centuries using forced labour, including soldiers, convicts, peasants and prisoners of war. Scholars still debate whether its scale was purely defensive or symbolic, a display of imperial power meant to awe both subjects and enemies. You feel both interpretations pressing into your bones, as if the wall's presence alone carries authority over your body, mind, and spirit. Around you, men shuffle forward mechanically, each step measured against the risk of falling, misplacing a stone, or incurring the overseer's wrath. The younger boys cling to stones far too large for their frames, faces pale, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. You glance across a ridge, seeing labourers winding along a narrow path like ants along a colossal stone spine. The perspective is dizzying. The wall seems infinite, consuming everything in sight, swallowing mountains, rivers and valleys alike. Each stone you carry feels infinitesimal against this overwhelming scale, yet each contributes to the slow, relentless growth of this monumental creation. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered that the wall remembered every worker, every misstep, every act of endurance, and that its stones vibrated faintly under the weight of history. You feel it now, a subtle hum in your hands as you lift the stone, a connection to the countless labourers who came before, and the invisible continuity of effort threaded through centuries of construction. By mid-morning the sun warms the slope, sweat streaming into your eyes, mixing with dust and grime. Muscles ache, lungs rasp, yet you find yourself pausing briefly to take in the sheer breadth of what surrounds you. Peaks rise and fall like ocean waves, ridges stretch endlessly, and the wall snakes across them with relentless determination. You catch a glimpse of a distant tower, tiny yet monumental, a milestone in an unbroken chain of stone. The awareness of scale is dizzying, even terrifying. Each step is necessary, yet you are aware of your individual insignificance against the vastness of both the wall and the world it traverses. Historical fact. Watchtowers were spaced along the wall at regular intervals, serving both defensive and communication purposes. Historians still debate whether these towers were strategically placed for military advantage or also to psychologically impress both labourers and observers with the wall's scale. You feel that duality in every glance, fear mixed with awe, smallness juxtaposed with the enormity of human enterprise. By noon, the sun climbs high, pressing against your back as you trudge forward. Dust and sweat coat your skin, muscles hollowed and taut. You glance down a steep slope, seeing men labouring hundreds of feet below, moving stones like tiny pebbles against the vast canvas of the wall. Their efforts are heroic and tragic, each act of endurance swallowed by the magnitude of the structure itself. You wonder, not for the first time, if the wall is as much a monument to human suffering as it is to human achievement. Quirky detail. Some labourers claimed that if you stood on a ridge at just the right angle, the wall appeared to undulate, a living serpent of stone crawling across the mountains. You pause for a moment, imagining it moving beneath your feet, a surreal but strangely comforting illusion amid relentless labour. Afternoon stretches unbearably. Each step is a battle, every stone heavier than the last. Muscles burn, arms shake, lungs rasp. Men collapse, pushed onward by overseers' rods, a rhythm both cruel and necessary. The wall absorbs all effort, indifferent to suffering, yet it grows steadily, a living memory of endurance, discipline, and human frailty. You carry your stone onward, aware of the countless others doing the same across ridges beyond sight, an army of shadows feeding the wall's monumental purpose. Evening brings the first real pause of the day. Shadows stretch long across the slope, stones radiating residual heat into aching muscles. Men collapse into camp, some silent, some whispering prayers, all exhausted. You take a moment to look back, tracing the wall winding endlessly across peaks and valleys, a sinuous, unbroken testament to centuries of human endeavour. It is awe-inspiring, terrifying, and humbling in equal measure. Historians still argue whether the wall's scale was intended to intimidate external threats or internal labourers, or both. seeing it stretch endlessly before you, each stone a tiny piece of a massive story, you understand how magnitude itself becomes both a weapon and a monument. Survival relies on endurance, vigilance, and the faint hope that your labour contributes to something larger, something enduring, even if your own life feels insignificant against this monumental backdrop. Night descends, stones cool but retain weight, pressing into muscles and limbs as you collapse onto the rough ground. Dust settles into every crease, every fold of your body. Sleep comes reluctantly, fragile and temporary. Your mind echoes the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. Relentless. Eternal. The wall rises, unfeeling and unstoppable, and you are one shadow among many, a single thread in a vast, unending story of human endurance, suffering, and survival. The morning is hazy, dust lingering in the air from yesterday's labour, mixing with the faint scent of sweat and stone. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, muscles protesting with every movement, lungs rasping with grit-laden air. Around you, men shuffle forward mechanically, faces pale and drawn, eyes glazed with exhaustion. But today, despite the relentless weight and the overseer's scrutiny, something shifts. Small gestures begin to ripple through the ranks. A glance, a whispered joke, a tiny act of resistance that somehow brings a flicker of humanity into the punishing rhythm of labour. You notice it first in a young boy a few steps ahead, scratching a small mark into the corner of his stone before placing it in line. It is almost imperceptible, a simple cross, but the action radiates quiet defiance. Others follow subtly. One hums a low, absurd tune while moving stones. Another deliberately shifts his weight to ease the strain, testing the limits of what the overseers will allow. You can't help but feel a strange surge of camaraderie and hope, a sense that even in this unending expanse of stone, human spirit can flicker and persist. Historical fact. Archaeological evidence and historical accounts suggest that some labourers would carve small symbols, initials, or markings into stones, a quiet assertion of identity amidst the anonymity of forced labour. Scholars still debate whether these were merely acts of superstition, defiance, or memorialisation. Standing here, you feel all three, a reminder that even under oppressive control, small acts of agency endure. The overseers patrol with their bamboo rods, eyes sharp, ever vigilant. But these minor acts of defiance often go unnoticed, hidden in the chaos of dust, sweat, and exhaustion. You press a tiny mark into a stone yourself, barely noticeable, your hands shaking from both fear and exertion. It feels like a heartbeat, a subtle reminder that you exist, even if the wall seems to consume identity wholesale. Quirky detail. Some labourers believed that scratching symbols into stones would grant them protection from misfortune, an absurd superstition that somehow lent courage. You hum a quiet, nonsensical rhyme as you work, feeling the odd mix of fear and amusement. It doesn't change the weight of the stone or the heat of the sun, but it allows your mind a brief respite, a mental foothold amid relentless labour. By mid-morning the sun climbs high, turning dust into grit that scratches eyes and throat. The wall stretches endlessly ahead, a serpent of stone that absorbs sweat, fear and endurance alike. You glance at companions, noting subtle nods, quiet smiles, shared glances, small, almost imperceptible acknowledgements of solidarity. These minor rebellions, these shared moments, ripple through the labourers like a secret current. The overseers are present, their rods snapping sharply. But even they cannot suppress these micro-gestures, these tiny assertions of humanity against monumental oppression. Historical fact. Forced labour on the Great Wall often stripped workers of personal identity, clothing and possessions. Acts of marking stones or quietly singing served as subtle, psychological resistance. Scholars still debate the prevalence and significance of these acts, but their persistence suggests a deep human need for self-expression, even in dire conditions. You feel it keenly now, a reminder that survival is as much psychological as it is physical. Afternoon drags on. The slope is relentless, stones heavy, muscles screaming, yet small acts of defiance continue. Whispers of jokes, silent markings, brief glances exchange understanding and solidarity. Even exhausted bodies seem to move with a fraction more determination, buoyed by these faint threads of shared resistance. Every stone placed carries weight, not just in physical burden, but in the quiet assertion that, while the wall towers above, the spirit beneath cannot be wholly extinguished. Quirky detail. One labourer carefully tied a small piece of cloth to a stone, a miniature flag signalling a sense of pride or ownership. You mimic him subtly, placing a tiny ribbon you've kept hidden for days under a stone corner. It feels absurd yet comforting. A tiny anchor of individuality against the uniformity of labour. By evening, shadows stretch across the slope. Men collapse into camp, some silently, some whispering prayers, others sharing brief moments of humour or quiet defiance. You catch yourself grinning faintly, exhausted yet buoyed by these shared signals. The wall stretches into darkness, monumental, unfeeling, yet beneath it, the faint heartbeat of human spirit persists. Historians still debate the significance of minor acts of defiance on the wall. Were they negligible, merely distractions, or did they serve as psychological lifelines for those enduring unimaginable labour? You feel the answer in your bones, the small victories etched into stone, hums, whispers, and stolen smiles. Survival relies not only on endurance but on the subtle assertion that you are more than a shadow, more than a stone carrier. You are human, and humanity persists even here. Night descends, stones retain residual warmth, pressing into exhausted bodies. Dust settles into every crease. Sleep comes reluctantly, a fragile pause, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. Even under the wall's indifferent gaze, small acts of defiance whisper of persistence, connection, and the enduring spark of human spirit. The morning sun presses down relentlessly, warm and unforgiving, cutting through the thin haze of dust and sweat that lingers from yesterday. You wake stiff, muscles sore and joints screaming in protest, the weight of yesterday's labour still pressing on your shoulders and back. The stone you lift today feels heavier than usual, slick with the sweat that drips unceasingly from your brow, staining your tunic and mingling with the grime and dust. Hunger gnaws quietly but persistently at your stomach, a hollow, insistent ache that threatens to sap your strength, even as the overseer's rod snaps sharply in the distance. You inhale grit-laden air and trudge forward, aware that any pause could bring punishment as surely as it brings pain. Around you, men move mechanically, muscles trembling, eyes glazed with exhaustion and resignation. The young boys, some barely more than children, stagger beside adults, their small hands clutching stones too large for their frames. You glance down the line and see the toll that insufficient food has taken. Hollow cheeks, gaunt limbs, trembling hands. Hunger is a constant gnawing companion, an invisible overseer that demands endurance, yet weakens muscles and resolve alike. A man stumbles, knees buckling under the weight of his stone, and the overseer strikes sharply, forcing him upright. You tighten your grip, muscles quivering, focusing not on comfort or ease but on survival, each step an assertion of persistence against fatigue and appetite. Historical fact. Labourers on the Great Wall were often provided meagre rations, sometimes just a small portion of millet or dry bread per day, insufficient to sustain their immense physical exertion. Scholars still debate whether these rations were deliberately minimal to enforce dependency and control, or simply reflective of logistical constraints. You feel the effects in every muscle, every tremble, every shallow breath, acutely aware of the fine line between energy and collapse. Quirky detail. Some labourers secretly collected wild herbs, seeds or insects to supplement their meagre rations. You once tried to nibble on a dried root hidden in the mud, grimacing at its bitterness, yet savouring the faint, fleeting nourishment. These small, almost imperceptible scavengers feel like acts of ingenuity and defiance, tiny victories against the wall's omnipotent demands. By mid-morning, your stomach protests more insistently, a hollow growl echoing beneath the rhythmic march of stone and foot. Sweat mixes with dust and grit, coating your skin like a second layer of discomfort. The line of labourers moves with mechanical precision, yet each falter carries the threat of overseer reprimand. One man pauses, clutching his midsection, and the overseer cracks the bamboo rod across the stone beside him. The sound resonates like a cruel punctuation mark. Pause. Yes, but only at the cost of renewed effort and humiliation. Historical fact. The caloric demands of labouring on the wall far exceeded what workers were provided. Many chroniclers reported that malnutrition was rampant, weakening labourers and contributing to illness and accidents. Scholars still debate whether authorities recognised the extent of these dangers or viewed them as an acceptable cost of construction. Feeling the hollow ache in your stomach and the tremor in your limbs, you understand how both interpretations can coexist. By noon, the sun presses down with increasing intensity, warming stones that radiate heat into muscles already hollowed from exertion. You glance at the young boys struggling beside you, some hunched painfully, faces pale and gaunt, limbs quivering under stones that seem impossibly heavy. Hunger amplifies the effort required. Even simple balance becomes a monumental task. One boy falters, stone slipping, and the overseer's bamboo rod cracks beside him. He rises again, trembling, driven by instinct, fear, and a faint, desperate hope of survival. You push forward, muscles trembling, ignoring the persistent gnawing at your insides, focusing only on the rhythm. Lift, step, place, descend. Quirky detail. Some workers whispered that rubbing a dry millet kernel on their tongue could trick the stomach into feeling less empty, a placebo of sustenance. You try it, tasting the faint, bitter grain, and allow yourself a small mental smile. The trick does nothing to restore strength, but it brings a tiny flicker of hope and humour amid relentless hardship. Afternoon drags interminably. Stones feel heavier, muscles burn more sharply, and the gnawing hunger threatens to sap both energy and morale. Men collapse, only to be prodded upright by overseers wielding bamboo rods with unyielding persistence. The wall stretches above and below, indifferent to the plight of those who feed its growth, monumental in both scale and indifference. You press onward, every movement a negotiation between exhaustion, hunger, and fear. Evening brings slight relief. Shadows stretch across the slope, stones cool marginally, but muscles ache with residual heat. You stagger into camp, stomach hollow, muscles trembling, lungs rasping. Men collapse wherever they can, silent, whispering prayers, or sharing brief morsels of food. The wall looms above, monumental, unfeeling, yet beneath it, labourers' endurance and ingenuity persist. Historians still debate whether starvation-level rations were a calculated tactic of control or merely logistical necessity. Witnessing the effects on men and boys alike, the debate becomes a living reality. Hunger is both punishment and circumstance, shaping labourers' physical limits and psychological resilience. Survival here demands not only endurance but cunning, subtle defiance, and the ability to persist despite a body that demands sustenance it is denied. Night finally descends. Stones are cool, pressing against exhausted muscles. You lie on rough earth, trembling, dust settling into every crease. Sleep comes reluctantly, a fragile pause, mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. Hunger and fatigue linger, constant companions, yet the wall continues, monumental, unfeeling, unstoppable, and you remain a shadow among many, feeding its growth, a single thread in a vast, unending story of human endurance. The sun has finally dipped below the jagged horizon, leaving a bruised purple and amber sky stretching across the ridge. Evening settles in slowly, but it brings little comfort. The air is thick with dust that has settled after a day of relentless toil, mixed with the metallic tang of sweat and the faint lingering smell of mud from yesterday's storm. You slump under the weight of your stone one last time before the final descent, muscles trembling violently, lungs rasping and back aching from repeated exertion. Every step feels like wading through lead, and yet the overseer's watchful eyes leave no room for hesitation. You trudge forward, aware that the day is ending but that your exhaustion is still under scrutiny. Around you, labourers move mechanically, a series of shadows descending the slope, each carrying burdens that seem increasingly impossible as fatigue tightens every muscle. The younger boys, some barely in their teens, stumble beside men who themselves look like ghosts of what they were at dawn. Sweat-soaked clothing clings to every crevice of skin, muscles burn with repetitive motion, and every stone feels heavier than the last. You catch glimpses of faces pale and drawn, eyes half closed, some muttering under their breath in desperation or fatigue. Fear, pain, and exhaustion hang thick in the air, almost tangible. Historical fact. Labourers on the Great Wall often worked from sunrise to sunset with minimal breaks, leaving them in a near-constant state of physical and mental exhaustion. Scholars still debate whether the extreme schedules were primarily for efficiency, intimidation, or both. Standing here, every fibre of your being feels the intersection of both arguments, the wall's relentless demands and the overseer's calculated pressure. The descent is treacherous. Loose stones, slick mud, and sweat-slicked hands make each step a gamble. One misstep could send both you and your burden tumbling down the slope. You see a young boy falter and nearly fall, saved only by grabbing the rough stone edge beside him. The overseer cracks the bamboo rod sharply across a nearby stone, a harsh punctuation to the near accident. You continue, hands gripping stone, muscles quivering, mind cycling between calculation, fear, and the simple desire to survive another night. Quirky detail. Some workers whispered about the shadow of the wall that followed them down the slope, a spectral reminder of their fatigue and insignificance in the grand scheme. You glance at the long shadow stretching across the ridges, feeling the odd mix of dread and amusement, a mental trick to distract from exhaustion and fear. By mid-evening, the last workers reach camp. The air is heavy with quiet murmurs, shallow breathing, and the occasional grunt as men collapse wherever they can. Stones still rest against shoulders or lean against the slope, evidence of labour that refuses to cease even after sunset. You slump onto rough earth, muscles trembling, dust and grit embedded in every crease, every fold. Hunger gnaws at your stomach, a reminder that physical strain never truly ceases, even as darkness cloaks the landscape. Historical fact. Chroniclers often noted that nighttime brought only minimal relief for labourers, with little food, no medical care, and sometimes the continued insistence of overseers to prepare for the next day. Scholars still debate whether the night watch was designed for control or simply a practical necessity. Either way, the psychological and physical toll is evident as men huddle silently, exhausted and wary. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered quiet prayers to minor gods or spirits of the mountains, hoping for strength or safety, while others sang tiny absurd songs to distract themselves from fatigue. You catch yourself humming a soft tune under your breath, a fragile thread of humour and defiance that binds you to those around you. Even the faintest moment of levity feels like a small triumph in the midst of relentless hardship. As darkness deepens, fires from distant camps cast flickering light over the slope. Shadows dance over stones, highlighting ridges and valleys, making the wall appear both colossal and unending. You lie down finally, muscles refusing to respond, body trembling from exertion and cold seeped through sweat-soaked clothes. The line of labourers stretches across the ridge, silent but alive, each a thread woven into the massive tapestry of human endurance, fear, and survival. Night deepens, exhaustion weighs on every soul, dust settles, muscles ache, hunger persists, and sleep teeters on the edge of consciousness, fragile and fleeting. You close your eyes, heart still racing, mind replaying the rhythm of the day, stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. The wall looms overhead, monumental, indifferent, yet beneath it, resilience persists in small, exhausted, determined shadows. Historians still argue whether the physical and psychological toll of nightly exhaustion was a deliberate method of control or simply a consequence of the wall's monumental demands. Standing here, feeling every ache, tremor and strain, both possibilities feel painfully real. Survival relies on perseverance, on subtle mental tricks, and on enduring a body that is constantly tested, stretched, and pushed to its limits. The morning light is pale and hesitant, filtering weakly through a lingering haze of dust and smoke from distant fires. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, muscles protesting, joints stiff and throbbing from the relentless strain of days and nights spent on the slope. Every step feels like an argument with gravity itself, and yet the overseer's rods crack sharply in the distance, reminding you that hesitation is a luxury forbidden. Around you, labourers move mechanically, some limping slightly, others favouring a shoulder or a knee, a silent chorus of injury and endurance. Each stone is heavier than the last, each movement a negotiation between pain and necessity. Historical fact. Many labourers suffered injuries ranging from blisters and sprains to broken bones and concussions, often with little or no medical care available. Scholars still debate the extent to which injuries were tolerated, treated or ignored, but the archaeological record confirms that minor and major wounds were common and frequently exacerbated by continued labour. You feel the truth of both arguments in your aching muscles, strained joints, and bruised skin. Around you, improvisation has become a way of survival. A man wraps a strip of cloth around a swollen ankle, using mud and straw to create a makeshift brace, moving with awkward but deliberate precision. Another has fashioned a sling from discarded rope to support a dislocated shoulder. Stones balanced carefully in one hand, body leaning into the slope for leverage. You glance at your own hands, blistered and raw, and consider similar improvisation, bandaging with scraps of cloth, padding stones with worn tunic corners to ease the pressure. Necessity is both teacher and tyrant. Creativity is survival. Quirky detail. Some labourers use small stones as counterweights, balancing a heavy load by tying another stone to the opposite side of their bodies, a peculiar but surprisingly effective method of reducing fatigue. You watch a man stagger along, balancing two stones like a makeshift scale, and can't help but smile through your own exhaustion at the absurd ingenuity. These small tricks, absurd as they may seem, preserve bodies and minds in the relentless grind of the wall. By mid-morning, the sun has risen fully, pressing down with heat and intensity. Sweat mixes with dust, coating skin and clothing in a gritty, abrasive layer. Muscles ache hollow and taut, joints stiff with overuse, yet the slope demands constant movement. Injuries that would normally necessitate rest are instead worked through, mitigated by clever use of cloth, rope, mud, and determination. You notice a boy with a scraped knee improvising a pad from his own tunic, gingerly pressing onward. Fear sharpens his movements, but the small act of creativity lends him a fragile sense of control in an otherwise overwhelming environment. Historical fact. Archaeologists have found evidence of crude splints and improvised bandages at wall construction sites, suggesting that workers had to manage injuries largely on their own. Scholars still debate how much knowledge of basic first aid existed among labourers, but the ingenuity displayed in surviving through sheer necessity is evident. You feel it now in every tremor, every creative adjustment to carry, balance, or ease the burden of stone. The overseers patrol continuously, rods snapping, eyes keen. They notice some improvised devices and approve only grudgingly, seeing them as minor allowances for continued efficiency rather than genuine care. You walk a careful line, improvising subtly, ensuring that any sign of weakness or excessive leniency is invisible. Fatigue and injury are constant companions. Clever adaptation is your shield against collapse or punishment. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered that singing or muttering while improvising helped the body focus, turning creativity into a rhythm of survival. You hum quietly as you wrap a rough pad around a blistered hand, feeling a tiny spark of morale and human agency in the otherwise brutal cadence of labour. Afternoon stretches into a struggle against both injury and environmental punishment. Stones slide unexpectedly on the slope, requiring sudden adjustments. Joints protest with every lift. Muscles twitch and spasm. Improvisation becomes second nature, adjusting posture, redistributing weight, leaning on each other for support when no overseer is watching. Small victories, moving one step further, balancing one more stone, become monumental triumphs against the wall's relentless demands. Evening arrives, bringing a slight respite. Shadows stretch long across the slope, stones cool but still pressing heavily into aching bodies. Men collapse wherever they can, some tending to minor injuries with makeshift solutions, others simply resting until movement is again unavoidable. You press a cloth against a swelling shoulder, whispering a nonsensical rhyme to keep your mind engaged. a small rebellion against fatigue and pain. Historians still debate how widespread improvisation was among wool labourers, and whether it was a matter of ingenuity, necessity, or subtle defiance. Standing here, witnessing swollen joints, improvised braces, and the quiet determination of those around you, the answer feels obvious. It is all three: survival threaded through pain, ingenuity, and human will. Night falls, stones press into muscles and aching limbs, dust settles in every crease, sleep comes reluctantly, fleeting and fragile, mind echoing the rhythm of labour, stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. Injuries and improvisation mark the passage of another day, a testament to resilience and resourcefulness in the shadow of a monumental, unfeeling wall. The morning sun casts long, pale shadows across the slope, illuminating dust particles that float in the still air like tiny golden sparks. You hoist your stone onto your shoulders, muscles trembling but accustomed to the weight, lungs rasping against the fine grit that seems permanent in your throat. Around you, labourers move in their rigid rhythm, but there is something different today. Between groans and heavy steps, small gestures of camaraderie appear. Brief nods, shared glances, whispered reassurances, the occasional murmured joke. These subtle connections thread through the line like invisible ropes, holding spirits together even as the overseer's rods snap with sharp precision. Historical fact: despite the harsh conditions on the Great Wall, chroniclers noted that bonds often formed among labourers. Shared hardship created alliances and mutual support networks that could be essential for survival. Scholars still debate whether these relationships were strategic for mutual protection or purely organic responses to adversity. You feel the dual truth in every shared glance and hushed word. Connection both shields and motivates, binding human resilience into a collective force. You glance at a boy struggling beside you, limbs trembling under the weight of a stone far too heavy for his frame. You offer a brief nod and a whispered "steady," and his eyes light momentarily with relief. A man a few paces behind cracks a joke under his breath, a low, absurd line about stones turning into dinner if you carry them fast enough. Laughter is brief and cautious, quickly stifled as overseers sweep past, rods snapping dangerously close, but it lingers, a small rebellion against exhaustion and fear. You feel an unexpected warmth in your chest, a fragile, flickering flame of human connection in a landscape dominated by monumental stone and relentless labour. Quirky detail. Some labourers developed small, secret rituals to strengthen bonds, passing tiny tokens, sharing scraps of food, or giving discreet signals when one needed support. You tuck a small piece of cloth into a fellow worker's tunic strap, a silent gesture of solidarity, and watch him nod subtly, understanding without words. These micro-rituals create an invisible network of support that sustains morale and strengthens resolve. By mid-morning, the wall stretches endlessly across ridges, swallowing labourers into its monumental expanse. Stones feel heavier, muscles hollow and taut, yet camaraderie acts like an invisible pulley, distributing some of the burden. Men encourage each other, balancing stones together, correcting each other's posture, sharing advice in whispered tones. One man loses his grip, stone teetering dangerously, and a nearby worker lunges, steadying it just in time. The overseer's eyes pass over, unaware of the act of cooperation, but the temporary relief feels monumental. You continue, every step a negotiation of fatigue, fear, and subtle solidarity. Historical fact. Labourers were sometimes permitted small group interactions during work, as coordinated efforts increased efficiency in moving stones. Scholars still debate whether this social cooperation was encouraged by supervisors or entirely spontaneous among workers. The truth is palpable as you feel the combined strength of shared effort lighten the weight of the wall, if only slightly. Afternoon stretches with the sun overhead, heating stones into an oppressive warmth, sweat streaming down faces and backs, dust and grit mixing into every crevice of skin. Muscles scream with exhaustion, yet the quiet, unspoken support of those around you offers a buffer against collapse. Shared burdens, literal and figurative, provide a rhythm to the day. Stones are balanced together, encouragement murmured quietly, hands brushing in moments of subtle support, and even a brief private laugh becomes a small victory against the overwhelming monumentality of labour. Quirky detail. Some labourers created nicknames for each other based on the weight they could carry or their resilience, a light-hearted distraction that fostered camaraderie. You hear someone mutter, "stone bearer," in reference to a particularly stoic worker, and you suppress a laugh, feeling a rare moment of levity ripple through the exhaustion. It's absurd, it's small, but it matters. Evening arrives with long shadows stretching over the slope. Stones cool, muscles burn less sharply but ache persistently. Lungs rasp lightly in the thinning air. Men collapse into camp, some whispering prayers, others tending to minor injuries, and all carrying the unspoken knowledge that tomorrow will demand the same endurance. Camaraderie persists in small gestures, a shared scrap of food, a gentle nudge, a brief glance of reassurance. The wall remains monumental, indifferent, but beneath it, human connection threads resilience through fatigue and fear. Historians still argue about the impact of camaraderie on labourer survival, whether shared bonds were essential lifelines or merely minor psychological reprieves. Standing here, amidst aching bodies and weary faces, you feel the answer in subtle ways: whispered encouragement, cooperative lifts, shared smiles, and quiet solidarity. Survival depends not only on strength or endurance, but on these delicate networks of human connection, woven into the relentless rhythm of labour. Night finally settles. Stones press into tired limbs. Dust settles into every crease. Muscles twitch from exhaustion. Sleep comes reluctantly, fragile and fleeting. Your mind echoes the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. Relentless, eternal. Even under the wall's monumental gaze, camaraderie endures, a quiet, unyielding force sustaining the human spirit amid relentless adversity. The morning begins with an uneasy calm, clouds heavy and grey above the jagged ridges. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, muscles protesting, lungs rasping against the dust and grit that cling stubbornly to every breath. Around you, the labourers shuffle forward, pale faces drawn, muscles taut and trembling. The first drops are tentative, barely wetting the stone and dirt beneath your feet, but soon the sky darkens further, a rolling expanse of black clouds swallowing the sun, and the rain returns in earnest, drumming against stone, tunics, and the exposed flesh of weary arms. Historical fact. Sudden rainstorms were a common hazard on the Great Wall, making already treacherous slopes slick and dangerous. Historians still debate how much warning labourers were given, or whether they were expected to continue work regardless of the weather. Feeling the slippery stones beneath your feet, you realise that survival in this environment is as much about timing and balance as it is about endurance. The rain intensifies, mixing with mud and dust to form a slippery paste that coats hands, feet and clothing. Every step becomes a careful negotiation with gravity. the weight of the stone amplifying the risk of a tumble. You glance at the young boys struggling beside you, hands slick with mud, legs trembling as they fight to maintain balance. One misstep could send both them and their stones tumbling down the slope, yet the overseer's bamboo rods snap sharply, insisting on pace and precision despite the treacherous conditions. You tighten your grip, muscles quivering, eyes scanning every patch of footing as though the wall itself might swallow you whole. Quirky detail. Some labourers joked or perhaps believed that the wall liked to dance in the rain, shifting stones slightly to test your concentration. You find yourself smiling grimly at the absurdity, muttering under your breath to keep fear at bay, a tiny mental game to distract from the relentless risk. Even a small laugh feels like a triumph over exhaustion and peril. By mid-morning, the downpour is relentless. Stones slide and skid unpredictably, demanding constant vigilance. Muscles burn from the extra effort required to stabilize each step. Arms quiver as they strain to support the slick weight, and lungs rasp as you inhale rain-laden air. You see a man slip, stone tumbling, but his companion lunges, steadying both him and the rock with a miraculous grasp. Overseers pass by, eyes sharp, but apparently satisfied. Small acts of cooperation and improvisation now feel vital to survival. Historical fact. Work continued during rainstorms, and many labourers were injured due to slips and mudslides. Scholars still debate whether labour was halted strategically or driven by relentless imperial demands. You feel the truth of both interpretations in every slip, every precarious step, every tight grip on wet, heavy stone. Afternoon stretches on, the rain cooling the air slightly but making every motion more exhausting. The wall, already monumental, seems even more imposing under the grey sky, slick and treacherous. Labourers balance stones carefully, muscles shaking, eyes scanning the uneven slope. You notice the subtle ways men cooperate. A hand at a shoulder here, a whispered warning there, small adjustments to weight and stance to prevent falls. The rain has forced a heightened attentiveness, sharpening instincts even as fatigue gnaws relentlessly. Quirky detail. Some labourers claimed that humming or softly singing in the rain helped them maintain balance and morale, a rhythm to counteract fear and exhaustion. You try it, murmuring a nonsensical tune as you move, the sound absorbed by the roar of rain. It does little to ease the physical strain, but it offers a mental reprieve, a fragile sense of control. Evening arrives, the rain lightening into a drizzle, but the slope remains slick and dangerous. Stones glisten wet, shadows stretch long across the mud-streaked ground, and muscles ache from constant vigilance. Labourers collapse into camp wherever possible, clothing soaked, faces streaked with mud and sweat. Small smiles, whispered jokes, and brief gestures of solidarity persist, providing warmth amid the relentless wet and cold. The wall looms overhead, monumental, indifferent, yet beneath it, human ingenuity, cooperation and endurance weave a fragile tapestry of survival. Historians still debate whether working through rainstorms was considered strategic for progress, a demonstration of control, or simply unavoidable. You feel the reality in aching limbs, soaked clothes and trembling muscles. It is all of these, and yet it is survival itself that dictates each step, each careful placement of stone, each shared glance of reassurance. Night descends, stones retain residual cold, pressing into weary limbs. Dust and mud settle in every crease. Sleep comes reluctantly, fragile, fleeting, mind echoing the rhythm of labour. Stone, slope, rod, breath. relentless, eternal. Even as rain ceases, the memory of slippery slopes and soaked bodies lingers, a reminder that the wall is monumental, indifferent, and unyielding. Yet human resilience endures in every cautious, deliberate step. The morning begins shrouded in a thick, clinging fog that seems to swallow the ridge whole. You lift your stone onto your shoulders, muscles tight and protesting, lungs rasping as the damp, cold air fills them with each breath. Visibility is minimal, each step uncertain, the familiar slope transformed into a grey, ghostly landscape. The wall stretches ahead like a phantom serpent, its contours blurred, stones slick with lingering moisture. Labourers move cautiously, bodies tense, arms trembling with effort and uncertainty, each footfall a silent negotiation with both gravity and fear. The usual rhythm, stone, slope, rod, breath, feels disoriented, disrupted by the enveloping fog. Historical fact. Workers on the Great Wall often faced extreme weather, including dense fog that could make the slopes treacherous. Scholars still debate whether such conditions slowed construction strategically or whether labourers were expected to continue regardless. You feel both realities pressing on your shoulders, every step a gamble, every glance uncertain, each decision amplified by isolation and limited visibility. The fog wraps around labourers like a thick blanket, dulling sounds and swallowing shapes. Overhead, watchtowers disappear into the grey void, distant shouts muted and strange, almost dreamlike. Men glance sideways, eyes wide, struggling to orient themselves, relying on memory, instinct, and the faint touch of shoulders or stone to navigate. You notice the young boys struggling beside you, hands slipping slightly on the damp surfaces, feet finding unreliable purchase, faces pale and apprehensive. One misstep could be catastrophic, yet there is no room for pause or complaint under the ever-watchful overseers. Quirky detail. Some labourers whispered that the wall's stones appeared to move in the fog, shifting slightly in ways imperceptible to the eye but disorienting to the mind. You find yourself momentarily believing it, imagining the serpent of stone writhing and curling, a playful trick of fog and imagination. It brings a strange sense of amusement and terror, a mental distraction amid the relentless physical labour. By mid-morning the fog remains dense, a grey blanket over ridges, valleys, and workers alike. Stones are damp, heavy, and slick. Muscles scream with repeated exertion, lungs rasp with effort. Navigation becomes almost tactile, as hands and feet search for familiar edges, crevices, and footholds. One man stumbles, and another catches him by the tunic, adjusting balance with a whispered word. Overseers pass, rods snapping occasionally, but the fog seems to cloak much of the subtle collaboration among workers. Every gesture of aid, every whispered encouragement, becomes a lifeline in this grey, disorienting world. Historical fact. Isolation on remote sections of the wall created psychological strain, amplifying fatigue and fear among labourers. Scholars still debate whether isolation was a conscious tool of control or merely a byproduct of terrain and construction logistics. You feel both at once, disoriented, small, yet strangely alert, your mind forced to compensate for lost visibility and the wall's unyielding demands. Afternoon stretches into the endless grey. Fog muffles sounds, turning voices into ghostly whispers, masking the cracks of bamboo rods and the scrape of stone against stone. Stone slides subtly beneath your hands, muscles trembling with overcompensation, every movement calculated to avoid slip or strain. You notice subtle cues from companions, hands brushing against yours, whispered guidance, a shift in weight to stabilize each other's load. Shared struggle becomes amplified in isolation, a delicate choreography of survival in a landscape that feels simultaneously infinite and constricting. Quirky detail. Some labourers claimed that they could sense the wall beneath their feet in dense fog, as if the stones themselves provided a faint, imperceptible vibration guiding them. You feel something similar now. The wall seems alive, a subtle hum beneath muscles and hands, a quiet reassurance amid uncertainty. It's enough to steady trembling limbs, if only slightly. Evening brings little change. The fog thins slightly but remains pervasive, clinging to tunics, hair and stone. Shadows are absent, leaving contours flat and uncertain. Men collapse into camp, bodies trembling, limbs sore, minds frayed from isolation and effort. Tiny gestures of camaraderie, shared water, brief nods, whispered encouragements, persist, a fragile network sustaining morale amid fog, fatigue, and the wall's indifferent expanse. Historians still debate whether the psychological strain of isolation had lasting effects on labourers' health or productivity. Experiencing the fog, the muted sounds, the disorientation, it feels immediate and overwhelming. Survival depends on endurance, improvisation, and the quiet support of those around you. The wall stretches into grey infinity, monumental and unfeeling, yet human resilience flickers through the fog, small but unyielding. Night falls finally, fog thickening once more. Stones press into aching muscles, dust and moisture settle into every crease, lungs rasp weakly. Sleep arrives in fragments, reluctant and fleeting. Your mind echoes the rhythm of labour, stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. The wall looms above and around, monumental and indifferent, yet human endurance persists in whispered words, careful touches, and shared glances across the mist. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long, muted shadows across the slope, though today the light is diffused through lingering fog and dust. You pause, stone resting briefly on your shoulder, chest heaving, muscles trembling from the relentless labour of countless days. Around you, the wall stretches in both directions, colossal and indifferent, swallowing labourers into its monumental mass. For a moment you allow your mind to wander beyond the immediate strain, beyond the ache in your arms and legs, beyond the gnawing hunger and fatigue, to contemplate the sheer scale of what you are building. Historical fact. The Great Wall of China was an enormous multi-generational construction project, stretching thousands of miles and incorporating countless workers, many of whom were conscripted labourers. Scholars still debate how much of the wall's construction was planned in a continuous strategy versus piecemeal efforts driven by immediate military needs. Standing here, amidst dust, sweat and stone, the enormity of the endeavour feels palpable. Each stone you place a tiny part of a monumental, relentless project that will outlast you. Your hands ache from gripping stone, shoulders burn, and knees threaten rebellion with every step. Yet you lift another stone, place it carefully, and step back to measure alignment. The wall seems to rise endlessly, twisting along ridges, dipping into valleys, climbing heights that seem almost vertical. You glance at companions, sweat-streaked and exhausted, their faces a mosaic of fatigue, determination, and quiet resignation. Some murmur words of encouragement, small jokes to stave off despair. The shared experience of relentless labour has forged connections that are subtle yet profound, unspoken bonds that carry you through the monotony and strain. Quirky detail. Some labourers would carve small marks into stones as a personal signature, a claim of identity in a monumental project that threatened to erase individuality. You find yourself tracing the rough surface with your fingers, leaving a tiny scratch in the stone, almost invisible, but it feels like a small victory, a reminder that you exist within this immense endeavour. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion weighs heavily on every limb, yet a strange clarity settles over you. Each stone placed is a testament not only to the wall's enormity, but to human persistence. Every shove, lift, and careful placement is an assertion that even in oppression and fatigue, small acts of effort accumulate, creating a structure both functional and symbolic. You notice that despite the overseer's constant presence, labourers have developed methods to cooperate subtly, to ease burdens for one another, to maintain morale through whispered jokes, shared gestures, and quiet resilience. Historical fact. Archaeologists and historians note that morale and survival on the wall often depended on subtle collaboration and shared labour techniques, with informal knowledge passed among workers. Scholars still debate how structured or spontaneous these cooperative strategies were, observing companions adjusting each other's loads, sharing improvised tools, and maintaining small rituals of encouragement. You understand that survival depends as much on collective ingenuity as on individual endurance. Afternoon drifts lazily into evening, the air thick with dust, sweat, and the faint scent of mud and stone. Stones cool slightly but remain heavy, pressing into shoulders and backs. Muscles scream in protest, joints creak ominously, yet you lift, balance, and place each stone with a careful deliberation born of necessity. You glance down the wall's seemingly infinite stretch, and realize that each effort, each laborious repetition, is a link in a chain that stretches both across physical distance and generations. Quirky detail. Some workers whispered to the stones as they placed them, a mix of superstition and ritual meant to ensure alignment, good luck, or personal satisfaction. You find yourself murmuring a nonsense rhyme under your breath, a small comfort, a way of asserting control in an environment designed to strip control away. It feels absurd but comforting, an anchor in the relentless rhythm of labour. As evening deepens, shadows stretch across the slope. Labourers collapse into rough positions, bodies trembling, muscles spent, lungs rasping. Yet even in this state of exhaustion, the wall stretches before and behind you, monumental, unfeeling, yet somehow infused with human persistence. You reflect on the paradox. A structure built under duress, demanding immense suffering, yet capable of evoking awe, unity, and quiet resilience. Small acts, cooperation, improvisation, whispered humour, carved marks, infuse the labour with meaning, subtly transforming the wall from mere stone and mortar into a living record of endurance and survival. Historians still argue whether the wall's construction primarily symbolised imperial might or human resilience. Standing here, you realise it embodies both. Monumental in scale, unyielding in demand, yet simultaneously a testament to human ingenuity, collaboration, and the quiet persistence of spirit. Each stone, each gesture, each shared glance threads survival and determination into the very fabric of the wall. Night descends. The slope is silent save for shallow breathing and the faint rustle of cooling stones. Muscles tremble from exertion. Dust settles into every fold of clothing and skin. Sleep arrives cautiously, a fragile relief, your mind echoing the rhythm of labour, stone, slope, rod, breath, relentless, eternal. The wall, monumental and indifferent, endures, and so do you, a single thread in an immense tapestry of human persistence, fatigue, and small, profound victories of spirit. The night stretches long and quiet, a gentle contrast to the relentless rhythm of stone, slope, and rod that has dominated your days. Muscles ache, joints throb, and lungs still rasp faintly from exertion, but the immediate urgency of lifting, carrying, and balancing has faded into the soft hush of darkness. You lie on the rough earth, the chill of night pressing against your skin, dust and grit settling into every crease, and for a moment the enormity of the wall seems distant, almost dreamlike. The harsh sun, the relentless overseers, the weight of stone, they all retreat slightly into memory, replaced by the faint rhythm of your own heartbeat and the quiet whispers of companions around you. Breathe in slowly. Let the tension drain from your shoulders and arms. Feel the cool night air slide over sweat-slicked skin, carrying away the heat of exertion, leaving only the soft hum of the world settling into rest. Tiny gestures of camaraderie, whispered jokes, shared struggles, all the subtle human connections forged under immense strain, linger like warm embers in your chest. Even in the shadow of a monumental and indifferent wall, these moments of connection, resilience, and quiet defiance endure. Historians still argue about the human cost of the wall, and whether endurance under such hardship was a mark of oppression or extraordinary resilience. Tonight, in this soft pause between days of labour, you feel both truths coexisting. You feel the weight of exhaustion and hunger, yes, but also the delicate strength of perseverance, ingenuity and solidarity that threads through every day, every step, every stone. Let your mind drift slowly, letting your muscles release, letting the tension dissolve. The wall stretches on, monumental and eternal, yet here you are, alive, breathing, part of a vast story of human persistence. The rhythm of labour may echo in memory, but now you rest.